Chapter 461. The stairway twisted downward into darkness. Musashi clicked his wand. The light vanished after 3 steps, swallowed like a mouth that devoured life. The chill that rose up his spine was almost physical. More money, more money, more money, Gauci muttered to himself, steeling his nerves, then gave a cry and prepared to rush inside. If he could save his patron, he vowed he'd demand 10,000 galleons to soothe his wounded soul. Musashi, already determined to destroy whatever foul place this was, moved in without hesitation. They rounded the last corner, and a gust of wind blew out the remaining light. The 3 of them held their breath. The air reeked of blood, thick, suffocating. It felt as if countless lives had been erased there. The smell alone made them feel like they faced a terrible foe. Principal Chong set up a barrier inside that suppresses magic, Shizuka said, her voice trembling. No wizard can use spells. He fought in a war. He was known as a 100-man slayer swordsman. The implication was clear. A veteran swordsman of that caliber against magic users stripped of their magic was a terrifying prospect. Shizuka grabbed Musashi's hand. Please, let's go. Musashi knew that if he ran now, he might never have another chance, and he would never forgive himself. He took a steadying breath, withdrew his hand from hers, and said firmly, I won't give up. He stepped forward. Gauci immediately slapped Shizuka's hand away and clasped Musashi's in both of his voice thick with feeling. Good brother, let's go in together, 50-50 split. Even Gauci, a man who prized money above everything, was suddenly ready to split the reward to secure an ally after smelling the blood inside. Musashi tried to pull his hand free, but Gauci held tight and produced 2 small knives from his shoe, one for himself, one for Musashi. Don't ask why a wizard carried knives. Gauci was a professional, always ready. The 3 moved slowly around the corner. The scent of blood grew stronger. Gauci's hand brushed a soft stone. He paused, touched it again, felt fabric and something wet. He turned his head and his face drained of color. The first victim they saw had a slit throat. They stopped together at the sight that met them beyond the bend. Scattered bodies lay with throats slit, eyes pierced, brains scrambled. 3 people were impaled and connected by a single blade. Dozens of corpses littered the floor. Among them was a figure they recognized, Principal Chong, the military executioner known as the 100-man slayer. His face was slack with disbelief, his beard strangling his throat, his body hanging outside the railing. The bestowed sword Guangdao Heiping lay broken and discarded. Nearby, Gauci's patron was opening a glass case and inspecting the contents with clinical calm. John stood over platforms of thick liquid and the bodies within. Some of the children were local, others trafficked from afar. It was clear this place had been testing whether different races could be transformed from Muggle to wizard. John glanced up when the new arrivals came in, saw Gauci and the others, and said casually, Take these living ones out, 20 galleons each. Mission accomplished. Gauci, no longer able to be shocked, hurried to open the glass cases. Children were released one by one. Shizuka froze, tears welling in her eyes, while Musashi's gaze fixed on the very bottom platform. Musashi, if I remember right, there's a volcano under here, isn't there? John's voice was faint and cold. I don't like to lose. Silver hand, sir? Musashi said, stunned. John's right hand transformed into the silver hand. He grasped at the air, and the silver-veined sword materialized in his grip. At that instant, every rune in the room flared into flame. Who would dare set an array in the presence of a level 7 alchemist? It was audacity bordering on madness. Gauci had almost finished ushering people out when John raised the sword. Magic coalesced into a terrifying black energy and shot down toward the floor. I am a dragon, John intoned. The sword slammed into the ground. The flame at its tip coalesced into a dragon that drilled relentlessly into the earth. Musashi's face sank into horror as realization struck. He grabbed Shizuka's hand and roared, He's going to blow up the volcano. Run! Far beneath the institute, layer after layer of ancient rock yielded to the dragon's tunneling. The dormant volcano, asleep for nearly 1,000 years, felt the intrusion and awoke. This island nation was dotted with volcanoes. Beyond the famed Mount Fuji, the volcano beneath the Magic Institute was not insignificant. Fire elements surged, and the long-dormant mountain began to reassert itself. Gauci counted heads outside. The rescued children were rags and hollow-eyed like walking corpses. Principal Chong's so-called experiments here had been monstrous. He hadn't merely shocked them, he'd driven their emotions to extremes to boost their magic. He'd forced magically gifted children as young as 7 or 8 into sudden surges of power. Those who endured showed small success. Those who didn't had their memories wiped. The research had already driven Principal Chong to madness. Musashi and Shizuka fled, Shizuka collapsing into helpless sobs when she saw the children's vacant eyes. "Get out of here!" Gauci shouted, trying to marshal the survivors. Leaving, however, posed a problem. Musashi snapped back to himself. "To the giant seagulls, ride them out." Gauci hesitated. "Will they listen?" "They listen to the mentors," Musashi replied. He looked at Shizuka. She wiped her tears, nodded, and began to lead the children away. As they reached the outer platform, the ground shuddered with a thunderous rumble. Cracks fissured the earth, the island trembled, the ocean boiled into turbulent waves, and the nearby airbase blared alarms. Mentors rushed out in alarm. One middle-aged mentor saw Shizuka leading the children and demanded, "Mentor Shizuka, what are you doing?" This Mentor Lan wasn't privy to Principal Chong's experiments. "Mentor Lan, the volcano is erupting." "Hurry!" Shizuka shouted. The ground split. A great fissure barred their path and spewed hot air. Crimson lava churned and surged upward. Mentor Lan's suspicion evaporated at once. She didn't ask where the children had come from. She drew her wand and cast an ice-binding spell, forging a fragile pathway. "Quickly, take the children across." The heat was overwhelming. Mentor Lan felt her shoes beginning to melt. The other mentors poured out, every one of them trying to get people to safety. No one had time to think about Gauci or Musashi now. The Institute's alabaster walls began to crumble, dominoing into the collapse of entire buildings. White mist and the terrified cries of seagulls poured from the entrance. Several mentors and Gauci helped load children onto the giant seagulls' backs. The birds took off in 5 groups, each carrying 4 children and a mentor. As the 5th seagull prepared to lift, Shizuka looked down at Musashi and shouted, "Musashi, hurry and get on!" Musashi stared at the collapsing institute, where he had once studied and worked hard, where he had earned glory and felt at home. Now Principal Chong's crimes had left the school in ruins, laced with crimson lava. 100 feelings warred inside him. "No!" Gauci wailed, beating his chest and stamping his feet, more distraught than Musashi himself. Boss, how can I live without you? You still owe me so many fees." To Gauci, the loss of the institute and its patron felt like losing everything, his hopes of wealth, his golden galleons, gone in an instant. Musashi hauled Gauci toward the last seagull. They leapt aboard just as the lava surged and swallowed the institute completely. Above the island, oppressive dark clouds and rising hot air buffeted the giant seagulls, making them struggle to stay aloft, rocking dangerously as they fought for height and safety. Chapter 462. Multiple planes lifted off from the airbase to evacuate people as monitors picked up an imminent volcanic eruption. Sure enough, just as the giant seagull carrying Gauci and Chang departed the Magic Institute's island, a thunderous blast tore the night open. Crimson lava shot skyward. Volcanic ash billowed out, spreading so far it became catastrophic, blotting the stars and blanketing the region in a choking, ashen snowfall. The disaster set off nationwide alarms. People in neighboring cities fled to air raid shelters. Aftershocks rippled outward. Earthquakes struck here and there. That night, the entire country kept a wary watch, afraid the tremors might wake another behemoth. If that volcano fully blew, the nation itself could be erased. This fuss is larger than I expected. No ordinary mortal could survive such an eruption. A dragon could. Almost black scales slid through the lava as John traced the outpouring and left the volcano behind. He rose high into the night, his scales blending with the darkness so no one would notice. When he finally stopped, he flew out of the country and landed in an uninhabited mountain forest. There, his massive dragon form melted away, and he resumed his human shape. Indifferent, he held a newspaper he had borrowed, or rather requisitioned, from an unlucky wizard's owl. The destruction of a magic school, even in this long isolated place, was explosive news. A week had passed since John had set the volcano in motion, and the events at the Magic Institute had leapt into the public eye. The wizarding world buzzed. The Muggle press covered the volcanic eruption too. For John, the bigger the uproar, the better. The more attention elsewhere, the easier it was for him to vanish from sight. He wandered the forest, picking fruit when he grew hungry. Biting into a sour apple, he drew a scroll from his small pack and began to read, Night Parade of 100 Demons. As he scanned the old record, John frowned. The descriptions rang a bell, but with a different flavor from Inferi. Inferi were corpses animated by injected magic, empty shells without souls. The Night Parade described abandoning a physical body and imprinting a soul on other objects, moving like a ghost and commanding other spirits. Ghosts could make people uncomfortable, but on their own, they posed little real threat. The parade, however, gave ghosts the power to touch and affect the living. Soul magic, John murmured, stroking his chin. Principal Chong's goals go deeper than that. Legends in that country spoke of 100 demons and great monsters. Chong sought an army, 100 demons whose souls would be bound to modified bodies to serve under a single command. That would be a terrifying force. The body modifications John had glimpsed, the silent corpses bathed in viscous liquid, were monstrous and illegal. A flash of ferocity crossed his eyes. Shame I didn't get to the Misty Realm to find the god of death. His soul would be useful. The Misty Realm was no place one wandered into casually. John had only reached it 3 times, always with help from other souls. He had met the god of death twice. To avoid waste, he had once extracted an old man's soul and parted it into fine threads. Scoundrels like that shouldn't get easy passage to the underworld. He wasn't worried about being seen in the mountain woods. After some walking, he came across a church. The relationship between wizards and the church was complicated and peculiar. John strode up the steps and, as he approached, altered his appearance. His hair lightened from black to gold, his features sharpened, maturity carved into his face. Inside there were no nuns, but there was a priest, a man whose presence seemed crafted to charm. A worn priest's robe hung on him. His eyes were different colors, his looks both wicked and handsome. Grindelwald. John recognized him the instant he entered. Grindelwald saw him too. It felt like an encounter between a first Dark Lord and a second king. John raised his right hand and clenched it. A silver-veined sword kindled into being, slicing through the air as golden flames hissed along the blade. With his left, he brought out his wand. "What is left to say when enemies meet on a narrow road?" he asked coldly. "Or is this really a coincidence?" Grindelwald did not look surprised or alarmed. He clasped his hands behind his back and spoke in that persuasive tone that had turned so many to his cause. "Long time no see, John. I always thought fate would bring us together again." John kept his guard high. Grindelwald's robe was worn with a casual charm. If anyone lived nearby, John would suspect they were already under this man's influence. Grindelwald watched him with the amused patience of someone who understood people well, a natural psychologist in Muggle terms. "Maybe we don't have to be enemies," Grindelwald continued, slowly pacing the wooden floor, each creak measured. "Why not cooperate for a while, remove outside interference, and settle our differences later?" John's jaw tightened. "Do you really believe that? You forget, if not for you, none of this would be happening now." Grindelwald's voice was level, almost conversational. "Lord Voldemort asked me for the same thing." Hearing Grindelwald quote his own phrase, John felt a strange twist inside. He remembered how Grindelwald had once foiled him. Had the man not intervened, Voldemort would have been delivered to the god of death last June. Now Grindelwald dared propose an alliance. John's disbelief hardened into cold humor. "Equivalent exchange is an alchemist's basic principle," Grindelwald said, as if reciting a certainty. "That was Voldemort's condition when he sought me." John answered in a low voice, "Not everyone can pay for an alchemist's bargain." "Trading with the god of death is a bold move," Grindelwald replied, his unique eyes fixed on John. "No one else would have done it." "Don't pretend you understand me," John snapped. "We've only met twice." Grindelwald smiled, that wicked, confident smile, and drew the elder wand. John readied himself, every muscle tensed. Then Grindelwald shook his head slowly. "Don't think about fighting. There may be few people here, but a battle would attract annoying eyes." He meant Aurors, no doubt. The two men were in the same predicament. Neither wanted their location exposed. A duel would draw attention. With a light scoff, Grindelwald waved his wand and vanished. John waited several minutes, then eased his sword away once he was certain Grindelwald was gone. He had greeted the man with full readiness for a fight despite his altered appearance. Yoel? Grindelwald had spoken the name as he left, a strange appellation. John flicked his wand and cast a super sense spell. The church's layout, every hidden corner and recent trace of magic, reflected in his mind. No one else was inside. Even when confronting a master who wielded the Elder Wand, John had kept his use of apparition and other moves measured. In clashes between masters, the smallest lapse was fatal. He had not given Grindelwald a single opening. After a long moment leaning against a pew, he let the scroll and the newspaper rest in his bag and considered their meeting. Coincidence? Perhaps. Both men were in hiding. Running into each other in a remote place was not impossible. Yet John couldn't shake one question. Where had Grindelwald's saints gone? Could Grindelwald have come out alone this time? Or had he only just arrived, like John, and not yet gathered followers? Either way, encountering Grindelwald and getting away unharmed was fortunate. If not for the Elder Wand, John might even have tried to strike him down. But the Elder Wand's nature made it dangerous. Crossing even a couple of levels would almost certainly mean defeat for John. After resting a while in the church, John took out his badge, hesitated, and sent a message to the blonde. Hogwarts. When he left, the castle felt the absence, yet at the same time nothing obvious had changed. John had always been Slytherin's leader, their king. Without him, their hourglass of house points slowly dwindled. They still led, but Gryffindor was closing fast. At Hogwarts, Harry sat down to breakfast in the Great Hall. Ron had missed the apparition exam on April 21st because of poisoning, but it wasn't the worst problem. Hagrid's Aragog had finally died that same day. Harry hadn't been old enough to sit the exam anyway, so he didn't go. Hagrid invited everyone to the funeral, but Ron, propped up in the infirmary, insisted he couldn't attend. Hermione, consumed by an apparition exam of her own, didn't go either. Only Harry went. On the way to the funeral, Harry ran into Professor Slughorn. Remembering Dumbledore's task, Harry struck up a conversation. Slughorn, who as a potions master understood the value of acromantula venom, was understandably interested when Harry mentioned the funeral. Hagrid, in his grief and bewilderment, didn't give Slughorn a proper look. He didn't turn him away, but he didn't help either. Slughorn, left with prepared bottles he couldn't properly use, covertly slipped a few vials to Harry, treating the boy like a collector's curiosity. The dead spider was immense. Even its corpse and bristling hair made Harry recoil. Still, mindful of Dumbledore's instructions, he pretended to inspect the body closely and, under Slughorn's guidance, succeeded in obtaining top-grade acromantula venom. Afterwards, Slughorn left in a hurry, and Hagrid descended into tears and heavy drinking that lasted long into the night. Harry regretted the excess the next day. His head ached, but the episode had improved his standing with Slughorn. He also threw himself into advanced potion-making, gleaning knowledge that made him more confident when dealing with Slughorn. Dumbledore continued to teach Harry at irregular intervals. Harry knew how lucky he was to receive guidance from the greatest wizard in the world. His restless heart calmed. Then, on an impulse, Harry drank 3 drops of Felix Felicis. The luck made everything feel as if it would go smoothly. Before potions that afternoon, he accidentally knocked over a copper scale. Snape sneered. Harry wasn't annoyed. He found a replacement in the cabinet. It happened to be the last one, and Harry took it. Returning to the common room after class, he discovered the copper scale had been brought back. Inspired, he quietly reclaimed it. By coincidence, Slughorn came by to use the classroom for an experiment just then, and Harry happened to be there. With the lucky edge of Felix Felicis and the insights from his reading, Harry suggested adding a new ingredient. Slughorn was astonished. "I think we should have a little drink to celebrate this excellent experiment," he said, and led Harry up to the headmaster's office. Slughorn drank heavily, and under flattery, drank more. In his muddled state, he would probably remember nothing later. Harry saw his chance. While Slughorn was drunk and generous, Harry asked about a conversation Slughorn had had with John. Slughorn, in his cups, was unusually forthcoming. He produced a memory, bottled it, and handed it to Harry. Thrilled, Harry slipped the bottle into his pocket and left. By the time he reached the gatekeeper's office, the Felix Felicis had worn off. He found the door ajar and walked in. Dumbledore sat with a copy of the Daily Prophet, staring at a headline as if in a daze. Even Harry couldn't get his attention at first. "Professor?" Harry called softly. Dumbledore looked up, folding down the paper. Harry's eye caught a sensational photograph on the front page, an erupting volcano, and a familiar name, Johnny Silverhand. Chapter: The Constellation Society, Without Its King. Slytherin had essentially sealed the Quidditch championship that year. Last Saturday, they'd beaten Hufflepuff, capping an undefeated season and securing the position of the new captain, Draco Malfoy. At the Slytherin table, Malfoy and Astoria sat together while Daphne leafed through the Daily Prophet, exactly as John used to, though some suspected she was trying to avoid looking at something. Malfoy let slip a smug complaint. How boring. No one this year was worth a proper match. His arrogance earned dirty looks from passing Hufflepuff students. Rumors said the Slytherin team hadn't played fair. During the final match, Goyle's beater's bat had accidentally slipped from his hands and struck Hufflepuff's main chaser, leading to a humiliating score and Hufflepuff's elimination. Ernie Macmillan reportedly begged his dean for a proper duel with Malfoy. Hufflepuff sneered whenever they passed the Slytherin table. Daphne set down the paper. "Another wizard's gone missing," she said, kicking at Crabbe, who was fooling around nearby. "People are disappearing everywhere. There have been werewolf attacks." Malfoy blinked. "Attacks? Who?" "Some poor boy. His throat was torn out. He's dead." Daphne's voice tightened. "The Ministry's investigating, but society's turned against the werewolf community, blaming them for bringing danger into people's lives." "That's ridiculous," Malfoy shot back. "The werewolf community is registered. Whoever did this must be a rogue werewolf." Astoria considered the situation. "It could be someone stirring up trouble," she said. "Father says the werewolves have more influence in the Ministry now." Mr. Greengrass had been a prudent wizard and a careful businessman. Astoria had inherited his caution and could see the implications. With Voldemort's strike spreading death and panic across the country, public anger needed an outlet. Dozens of wizards might be killed without public outcry, but when a werewolf attacked, the populace was quick to seize on it. The media barrage was drowning the official voices defending the werewolf community. The students, children of families who remembered the old days of John, felt that anxiety keenly. Daphne folded the newspaper, and an owl dropped another copy at their table. She picked it up. The front page image showed a volcano erupting in dramatic color, the caption screaming, "Johnny Silverhand appears at the Magic Institute, disappears after volcanic eruption." Daphne stared, pale. Astoria read over her shoulder, concern growing. Malfoy, noticing their expressions, snatched the paper away and grinned when he read. "Please, that's John. He won't get into real trouble. I won't be fooled twice." He assumed it was one of John's tricks, another stunt that wouldn't work on Draco Malfoy. Daphne simply wanted peace, but Malfoy was incorrigible. His eyes flashed with that bold, careless confidence. Later, Malfoy received a summons to the Constellation Society. Astoria had told him about it. After all, it was his own fault for misplacing his badge. "Draco, what happened to your hair?" Percy, who had just apparated into the Constellation Society, stared. Malfoy's hair stood on end like steel needles. "It's a new hairstyle," Malfoy sneered. "Don't you understand trends, bumpkin?" He always had to insult someone. Percy inwardly swore he would gnaw off his arm before caring about this boy again. Malfoy, his hair frozen by a hair-raising charm, stalked to his seat. The fireplace flared, and Fleur stepped out of the flames. "Addo," she cried, gathering Astoria in a warm embrace and kissing her soft cheek. "I knew you'd join the Constellation Society. Gabrielle misses you terribly." "I miss Gabrielle too," Astoria said, returning the hug. They had been keeping up a lively correspondence since the Quidditch World Cup. Distance had not weakened their friendship. Malfoy muttered sourly at the side. "Utto is what I call her." Fleur rolled her eyes and, with unmistakable dominance, took Astoria's hand and pulled her down to sit beside her. That single gesture declared plainly, "I'm the queen here, you stinky ferret boy." Neville came in and sat down, only to see Malfoy looking sullen. "Oh, by the way, Draco, Cedric sent you something." He flicked a small parcel toward Malfoy. Confident and precise as any seeker, Malfoy used his fast reflexes to snatch it. Poof! The object erupted into a cloud of dust. Malfoy was instantly covered in grit. Before he could react, the dust began moving of its own accord. Under the watchful eyes of everyone present, the grains coalesced into a human silhouette. A sand likeness of Cedric formed out of the swirling particles. The instant it finished taking shape, it lunged at Malfoy. "Draco, you scoundrel! Stinky ferret boy!" The sand Cedric hurled at him. Malfoy tried to dodge but couldn't. The sand figure knocked him and his chair over. The Sandman's mouth moved and roaring complaints poured out. "That's for bullying, Cho. That's for making fun of her. That's for catching the golden snitch. What on earth? What is this thing?" Malfoy could only kick at it, but his foot sank into the gritty body. The sand Cedric kept pounding him with rough sand fists. The blows didn't cause serious harm, but they left Malfoy choking on dust and coughing. "Let me see." Fleur produced the letter that had arrived with the sand construct and opened it. "It's a type of cursed sand from the Egyptian pyramids," she read aloud. "Enchanted to attack on the sender's command and equipped with a communication function." Percy summed it up, dryly. "An Egyptian howler, then." "Oh no, don't go into my pant leg," Malfoy screamed as the sand surged toward him. The most remarkable part was that no one leapt to help. They were all enjoying the show. There's a line between victory and cruelty, and everyone agreed that making someone's girlfriend cry deserved theatrical revenge. If cursed sand was acceptable now, who knew whether a cursed scarab would be next? The Sandric continued its tirade for a full 10 minutes. It was gloriously excessive. Cedric, always the model prefect, was now cursing for 10 straight minutes. If anyone else had tried that, they might have never stopped. When the assault ended, Malfoy picked himself up, a dust-covered mess. Astoria waved her wand and cleared him off with a few gentle motions. "All right, enough," Percy said once the sand had dissipated. He gestured for everyone to sit. Besides the message from Cedric, Chang had appeared as well. 7 people settled around the round table. "John," Daphne started, wanting to ask about him, but Percy raised a hand to silence her. He looked to Chang. "You can speak." Chang nodded, met everyone's gaze, and spoke in a low voice. "War is coming. Not a skirmish, not another one of the ministry brawls with dozens on each side. Real war." Faces hardened around the table. Chang continued, "Cedric is on his way back. This time it will be brutal. The pressure will come not only from Lord Voldemort, but from the dark creatures he's gathered. We also have to protect Hogwarts," he said, taking off the constellation badge and laying it on the table. "If Hogwarts cannot hold, we will activate the Constellation Society," he explained. "John has set permissions on the badges. If 5 badges are brought together, the Constellation Society can be activated. However, that must be a last resort. The power the Society commands is vast, and it carries risks." One by one, everyone removed their badges and placed them on the table. Malfoy looked down at his own dust-streaked clothes and felt bitterly the isolation of being the one everyone had laughed at. "There's one more thing," Chang said. "John has found the mole." A hush fell over the room. "He asked that you not act against them directly to avoid tipping them off," Chang added. "It isn't really Theodore, is it?" Malfoy asked. Chang nodded slowly. The Slytherins went silent. Malfoy's thoughts flicked to Pansy. She had outdone herself. Privet Drive. "My son hasn't written in ages." Watson melted sealing wax over an envelope and pressed his copper stamp into it, leaving an owl emblem on the seal. Across the kitchen, Mrs. Wick brought out a cup of black tea and, with amused affection, fed a strip of bacon to Kiki, the big-headed gray owl. Kiki opened his beak and gobbled it down. "You write every week," Mrs. Wick said, slipping her arms around Watson's shoulders. "John said he's very busy this year. He's in his 6th year, you know." Watson waved a hand in exasperation. "He hasn't answered in a month." He eyed Kiki. "Did you deliver the letter, Kiki?" Kiki cocked his head, swooped down, snatched another bit of bacon off the breakfast plate, and began to eat. Watson huffed petulantly and complained to his wife. Mrs. Wick only smiled and kissed his cheek. "The holidays are almost here. John will be back soon." "You'll see him for the hotel opening, won't you?" she said. "July," Watson replied. The thought brightened him. "I want the family to be here for it." Despite his sometimes carefree manner, Watson took his family seriously. He wanted to be someone his child could be proud of. After breakfast, Watson went to the garage. He had left roses in the passenger seat, intended as a surprise. As he started the car, he spotted someone standing motionless across the street. At first, he didn't pay much attention, but the stranger's odd clothing nagged at him. When he blinked, the figure was gone. An illusion? He muttered, and checking the time, hurried off. Once he had left, the stranger reappeared, standing on the path that led to the Wick house. As they stepped onto the lawn, their movement halted. They pulled a single strand of hair from beneath their hood and blew on it. The hair drifted toward the house, and before it could touch the lawn, a spark flashed, and the thread of hair vaporized. "Protective magic," the stranger muttered. After a long, appraising look at the house, they turned and walked away. Night fell. Watson returned with roses on the passenger seat, looking pleased with himself. As he pulled into the drive, there was a loud thud. "Did I hit someone?" He swore, heart sinking, and jumped out to check. A shabby man lay sprawled on the road as if struck. Watson crouched, found a faint pulse, and felt the man's shallow breath. "Thank Merlin," he breathed. He hauled the man to his feet. The man squinted, pointed shakily at Watson, and barely managed to whisper. "I'll take you to the hospital," Watson said, though he could see the man's leg was bleeding badly. With no first aid kit in the car, Watson wrapped his scarf tightly around the wound as a tourniquet and helped him toward the house. Because Watson led the man inside, the warding magic of the Wick household did not react. The man was, in effect, treated as an invited guest. Watson didn't notice the quick, clever gleam that crossed the stranger's face. He set the man down gently in the hallway. The stranger, breathing heavily, pushed a muddy sleeve to their mouth and croaked, "Wait for me here." Chapter 465. Watson reached the door, opened it, and hurried inside to look for the medicine box. After he left, the man standing across the street fished a wand from his pocket. He stood up and gazed up at the house. "Second King, do you like the gift I brought you?" he asked, a cruel smile on his face. The wand tip glowed red. The next second, boom. The explosion shook the Dursleys, who had been sitting down to dinner. Vernon Dursley dashed outside, stunned, and stared at the house now engulfed in flames. "Oh my God," Petunia screamed. "The Wicks are still inside." "Call the police," Vernon roared. Dudley lunged toward the burning house, but Vernon clung to him. "Don't go, Dudley." "They're in danger," Dudley shouted, straining against his father. Vernon wasn't about to let his son take a risk. The blast had even sent a dog statue hurtling out of the house. The Wicks were likely already dead. Dudley finally broke free and ran toward the fire, only to be forced back by the heat. Across the street, the man laughed softly, licking his jagged teeth and admiring his handiwork. Dudley noticed him and froze when he saw the wand. "It's him! He set the fire!" he shouted, and the man turned toward him. Vernon recognized the object in the man's hand. Realizing he had been spotted, the man decided to finish the job. He raised the wand. "Run, Dudley!" Vernon cried, yanking Petunia behind him. Dudley went pale. He thought of Harry, of the Dementor, and an icy numbness crept into his hands and feet. The man sneered and shaped the words. "Avada!" Bang! The man looked down in shock. His right hand had been blown apart, a bloody hole where his wrist had been. A silver flash streaked through the night. A thin red line scored his wrist and his hand fell away, severed as cleanly as if with a ruler. He turned his head and saw how it had happened. Watson, his coat scorched and smoking, stood with a pistol in one hand and an amulet in the other. A dining knife, glinting like a silver streak, had come down from the tree. Mrs. Wick now stood above, the knife glittering coldly in her hand. Pain registered. The attacker screamed. Anger hardened Watson's face as he fired again, bullets ripping into the man's thigh and arm. Blood poured from several new wounds. Watson stalked forward, grabbed the man by the collar, and demanded, "Who are you?" The pain had driven the man into madness. His scream slid into manic laughter. "We'll kill everyone connected to the Second King," he shouted, glaring at Watson. "He didn't show. He really died when his parents died." Watson caught the word parents, and a terrible idea formed. His face changed. "Who is the Second King?" he demanded, choking the man's throat. "And who is Master?" The man's eyes rolled. With a rattle of breath he managed, "The Second King is John Wick." Watson staggered back as if struck. "No, that can't be. My son, it can't be." He shook his head like a man in denial. John can't be dead." He raised his pistol and fired until the magazine clicked empty. The man was dead, But Watson's hands did not stop. He lunged at the corpse, punching and kicking as if trying to expel his panic. The Dursleys stood frozen, terrified. Just moments before, their neighbor had shot a man in front of them. Mrs. Wick moved to her husband and clung to him, voice trembling as she tried to steady herself. "John will be fine. He's at school. He's at school." Hearing that, Watson finally steadied. He forced himself to breathe, took a phone from his coat, and made a call. He glanced once more at the corpse and said into the receiver in a hollow voice, "I need to order dinner for one." The fire at the Wick house burned itself out. A great gray owl, its head unusually large, landed on Watson's shoulder, and he sat on the front step, face drawn. A small team arrived, wrapped the body, and carried it away. An old man approached, doffed his hat, and said respectfully, "Thank you for your first use, Mr. Wick." Watson looked up at him coldly. "How many of us are there?" he asked. The old man smiled. "Always waiting for your command." "Boss," Watson said simply. Far away, a plane lifted off from Russia. The cabin was so quiet a pin could have been heard. Even the pilot didn't dare drink a glass of vodka, not with those few ominous figures on board. Chapter 489, Young Children. June had brought a somber hush to Hogwarts. A Muggle family had been killed, already the 13th attack. The Aurors were unable to cope with that band of outlaws. Sometimes it was shops, sometimes entire families. Even high-ranking ministry officials had received threats. The former Dark Lord's return had emboldened them. Old Barty had grown suddenly senile. His judgment was failing, his approval ratings slipping, but with no real rival, he felt unthreatened. Many students had taken extended leave. At a time like this, exams and grades mattered less. The Patil parents had come to take their daughters home, but the girls had refused to leave. Seamus had argued loudly with his mother when she visited. The castle felt emptier than usual. Ron finally rolled out of bed and ate with an appetite he hadn't had in weeks. "I can't believe I still have to take the apparition exam," he complained. "I've been lying in bed for almost 2 months." "Dumbledore is here," someone had said, and Ron roused himself from his gloom. Harry, however, stared into space and only half heard. "What's wrong, Harry?" Hermione asked. He shrugged. "Has anyone seen Malfoy today?" Harry asked suddenly. "Malfoy?" Ron looked surprised. "Why would you ask?" "I saw Goyle heading toward Hagrid's," Ron said. "Maybe Malfoy was with him." Harry was startled. What would Goyle be doing at Hagrid's? If Malfoy had sent him, Malfoy might be there too. He thought back to the fragment of conversation he'd overheard by the second-floor lavatory and hesitated, but still didn't go. "Ginny," he called to her as she prepared to head to the library. "Have you seen Luna?" "No, maybe she's in the library or out with Tom," Ginny said with a shrug. "I'm going to the library. If you like, I'll try to find her." Ginny and Dean had recently broken up. Dean had a habit of fussing over her, and Ginny had finally had enough. She hadn't rejected attention altogether, and Harry hadn't yet found the courage to examine his own feelings. Ginny and Luna were both in 5th year and busy revising for their OWLs, so Harry didn't want to take up too much of their time. He wished Ginny luck and felt a vague unease settle over him, an instinctive sense, like the feeling that had told him where to find the golden snitch. After flipping through 2 pages of advanced potion-making, Harry decided to walk to Hagrid's hut. As he approached, Malfoy was coming out. Hagrid said something to him. Malfoy nodded, and then he left. Chapter 466. Harry didn't know why he was hiding. Malfoy and Goyle walked past the wall he was crouched behind. As their footsteps faded, Harry cautiously peered out. The book he'd slipped into his pocket fell free, and as he reached to grab it, another hand scooped it up first. Malfoy. "When are you going to stop snooping on everyone, Potter?" Malfoy sneered, casually opening the book Harry treasured and flicking through it. His brow suddenly knit, and he stared at Harry. "You stole Snape's book." "I didn't," Harry snapped. "Don't play innocent," Malfoy jeered. "I recognize his handwriting. This is his hand." He flipped to the title page and scoffed. "Half-Blood Prince? How arrogant." It might not have stung so much coming from anyone else, but from Malfoy the remark felt like a deliberate, cutting insult. "Wait, this handwriting looks familiar." Malfoy scanned the marginal notes, eyes moving between 2 different scripts, then his expression shifted into a smirk. "This belongs to Slytherin. You Gryffindor thief." Harry lunged to snatch the book back, but Malfoy stepped away just in time. "No wonder you're so good in potions," he said disdainfully. "Turns out you're stealing Slytherin's work. I'm returning it." "Give it back, Malfoy," Harry shouted. "Who gave you the right?" "Because this is Slytherin's. Professor Snape's notes. Can't you tell?" Malfoy said, tapping the page. He'd seen that handwriting often enough in Snape's notes while passing files for the Quidditch pitch. Hearing that hit Harry like a bolt of lightning. He'd always wondered who the Half-Blood Prince was. Snape? The man Harry probably hated most? He watched Malfoy walk away with the book and felt utterly hollow. He didn't even want to go to Hagrid's. He just wanted to be alone. Soon after Harry left, Hagrid hurried into the Forbidden Forest. Harry returned to the castle as dusk fell. Panicked footsteps echoed through the corridors. Students who'd been out for exams were rushing back in disarray. "What's happening?" Harry grabbed Ron and demanded. Ron looked pale with fear. Professor McGonagall pushed through the crowd, and her face ashen snapped. "Everyone to the Great Hall. Harry, go find Professor Slughorn." She gripped Harry's shoulder. "Lord Voldemort has come." That name stopped Harry for a moment. Then he sprang into action and sprinted for the headmaster's office. By the time Slughorn arrived in the Great Hall, McGonagall had already called the other professors together. Slughorn took in their ready stance. "What's happened, Minerva?" McGonagall drew a deep breath, her knuckles white, where she clenched her hands. "Hogsmeade was attacked. Lord Voldemort and his followers struck. The Aurors there were killed. The students fled back." "Hogsmeade has fallen?" Slughorn repeated, stunned. When she confirmed it, he looked like a man trying to steady himself. "Horace, we need to decide." McGonagall was firm. "Voldemort's target is Hogwarts. We must defend the castle." "But those people," Slughorn faltered. "We have Albus," she said. Hearing Dumbledore's name steadied Slughorn. He straightened. "Increase vigilance. Protect the children." Slughorn made several rapid arrangements and went to summon Dumbledore. All four deans were present. Snape glanced sourly towards Slytherin as the conversation ended. The Great Hall thrummed with a tense, nauseating silence. "Tell the others," McGonagall said. Many students were still spread throughout the school. She asked those who'd returned from exams to relay the orders. Flitwick rushed to set up the school's defenses. "Why would Voldemort attack Hogwarts directly?" Harry muttered, then hurried to gather the members of the old DA. Compared to most students, they had training and were more capable. Before long, Mr. and Mrs. Weasley arrived in the Great Hall. Relief washed over the room. "Thank goodness you're all right," Mrs. Weasley cried, embracing Harry and Ron. "Sirius told us." "We came from the Hog's Head," Mr. Weasley said. "I discovered there's a secret passage to Hogwarts. The area nearby was destroyed. There were injured people everywhere." "Enough," Mrs. Weasley cut in, pulling at Ginny. "Come with me, Ginny." "No, I'm staying," Ginny protested. "I'm not leaving." "You're only 15, Mrs. Weasley scolded. "Harry almost killed Lord Voldemort when he was 15. Ginny shot back, not willing to appear weak. Mrs. Weasley opened her mouth, but McGonagall intervened, asking Mr. Weasley whether the Ministry could send aid. Mr. Weasley shook his head. "I don't think so. We suspect the Minister has been compromised. The Ministry is in chaos. It seems we'll have to rely on ourselves." McGonagall raised her wand. "Pier totem locomotor." Statues and suits of armor clattered down from their pedestals in the corridors. McGonagall couldn't hide a flash of excitement. "I've wanted to try this for a long time. It's usually the headmaster's command, but Horace is occupied." "Hogwarts is under threat," she called. "Hold the line. Defend the school." The animated statues and armors poured out into the foyer. The students of the four houses were gathered in the Great Hall to be evacuated by their prefects. Older students could choose to stay. Dumbledore finally emerged from his office. Looking at the young faces around him, he was filled with 1,000 conflicted emotions. Chapter 490, The Arrival of the Attack. "We must be prepared to resist," Dumbledore said, his voice steadying those listening. "Voldemort is stronger now. There was a time when I was the one he feared most, but his coming here shows he no longer fears me. This will be a battle with an uncertain outcome," he continued, "but we have something powerful on our side, unity and love." While he spoke, a voice echoed through the Great Hall, high, cold, and clear, coming from all directions. "I know you are preparing to resist." Harry's pupils tightened. Hermione and Ron felt the same constriction around their hearts. "It's useless, Dumbledore," the voice called. "You may look outside the castle." The deans exchanged glances. McGonagall strode to the window and looked out. The sight drew a collective sharp intake of breath. A vast, dark mass on the grounds, an alarming number of figures far outnumbering Hogwarts' defenders. Students screamed when they saw it. "Your resistance is futile," Voldemort's voice continued. "You cannot match me. I do not desire needless deaths. As long as you hand over what I want, I will spare the teachers of Hogwarts. I do not wish for wizard blood to be shed. I will wait until midnight. Remember my words, Dumbledore." The voice faded. The castle fell into stunned silence, broken by heavy breathing and stifled sobs. Dumbledore sighed and then addressed the students with calm authority. "Filch will lead the younger ones out. Slytherin first." But the Slytherin table stayed motionless. Malfoy rose slowly, looked at Dumbledore, and announced, "Those under 5th year, don't get in the way." At his words, the younger Slytherin students shuffled up, though Astoria stayed seated. Malfoy glanced briefly at Theodore, then at the older Slytherins. "Follow me." The older Slytherin students rose and trailed after him. A Ravenclaw nearby objected, "You can't decide that for everyone." "I don't take orders from muddle-headed idiots." Malfoy sneered and strode off, leading his group. Snape watched without comment. Filch shepherded the students who were to leave. Harry watched the Slytherins' departure, unsure where Malfoy intended to lead them. Outside Slytherin, the younger students of the other houses were being evacuated. Among the older students, most Gryffindors remained, most Ravenclaws left, and about 2/3 of Hufflepuff stayed. They were choosing to stay and face whatever was coming. Harry felt useless and frustrated. There was nothing he could do right now. Then he saw Neville step away from the table and leave the Great Hall. Chapter 467. Harry's instincts told him Neville was headed for the Constellation Society. The Weasley twins arrived not long after, lugging boxes of Weasley's Wizard Wheezes and handing out their newest tricks to the students. Harry hovered behind George and asked, "George, do you have?" "No." George shook his head before Harry finished. "Don't even ask. Nobody knows where John is." "It's just like the report said, fell into a volcano and evaporated," Fred muttered, trying to sound light but failing. Harry felt his mood sink. Fred clapped him on the shoulder, solemn now. "We can't give up." Half an hour until midnight in the Slytherin common room. Malfoy led a group in, frowning. "Where's Theodore?" Theodore Knott, who'd been with them minutes before, was gone. Pansy hadn't even noticed. "If he's not here, it's fine," Malfoy told Daphne. "We can use these now." Daphne nodded and strode to John's dormitory. When she opened the door, a box flew out. "Everyone, put one on." Inside were amulets and rings of striking, enough sets for every student. Blaise picked up a ring and slid it on. "So cool. Where did John get these?" Crabbe and Goyle reached for rings too. Malfoy kicked them aside. "You too, wear these." He tossed them chainmail-like shirts from the box. They donned them and looked ready for battle, bodies armored but still missing helmets. Their charms weren't strong, but the armor helped. Elsewhere, unattended, Theodore slipped into the room of requirement and opened a cabinet, the Vanishing Cabinet. "Well done, child," a voice said. Bellatrix emerged. Theodore's heart froze. He had betrayed Hogwarts. He watched as she closed and reopened the cabinet, and more people spilled out from within. His chest burned with shame. "My father will be all right, won't he?" he asked. Bellatrix's grin was uglier than ever. A small green snake coiled around her neck. "I'm certain." She stared at the Vanishing Cabinet and laughed. Reinforcements, new Death Eaters, had arrived in Hogwarts far earlier than anyone had expected. When the time came, they poured out of the room of requirement and shoved Theodore to the stone. A green snake crept up his robes. An explosion ripped through the castle. The defenses McGonagall had set up were suddenly useless. Chaos erupted. Professors and members of the Order of the Phoenix hurried students into fighting formations and counterattacks. Dark creatures and wizards from outside the walls joined the assault. Professor Sprout led students in hurling mandrakes, whose screams knocked some creatures out. Banshees answered with fatal howls, but most students had earmuffs. Statues and suits of armor came alive and attacked the invaders. Lord Voldemort's recruitment had drawn fanatics from all over, criminals and killers eager to serve the Dark Lord. "Stupefy." A red jet of light struck a wizard, but a shield charm flashed up and deflected it. Lupin's eyes went wide. "It's an amulet," he shouted, warning everyone. The attacker's shield charms repelled student spells, and the invaders pressed forward, leaving wounded in their wake. The Weasley twins joined the fray, lobbing trick items and explosions. Sirius rode in on Buckbeak, then shifted into his huge black dog form and lunged at a wizard. Professor McGonagall and Professor Flitwick were each engaged with opponents, men with Asian features sent by Voldemort from Japan. Snape melted into the shadows, searching for the Dark Lord but wary. As a double agent, he dared not act rashly. Slughorn, feeling lucky after a dose of Felix Felicis, found spells missing him by strange angles. The battlefield split into pockets of combat. Mr. Weasley and Kingsley cleared enemies near the astronomy tower. In a corridor, Lupin intercepted a pack of werewolves hunting students and met them with a heavy gaze. "Is it you?" he said quietly. They answered with tooth and claw. Tonks attacked from behind, blasting spells at the werewolves, but there were simply too many invaders. Most students, no matter their courage, couldn't match the adults, especially now that many enemies wore amulets that bolstered their defenses. Professor Sprout's team was the first to begin to break. Their mandrake attacks were thwarted, and they were pushed back. Sprout ordered the students to retreat while she tried to hold the line, but outnumbered and outgunned, she and her group were forced to fall back into the castle. In the foyer, Hufflepuff students found their head of house besieged. Just as they moved to help, lights bobbed in the corridor from Slytherin. The Slytherin students, organized and armored in a gleaming set called the Silver Hand series, advanced in formation. "Everyone, follow me," Malfoy barked, taking command. They pushed the invaders back out of the foyer, holding a crucial line. The fighting raged. Harry managed to incapacitate a wizard with a bat bogey hex, but then a tremor ran through the castle, vibrations that grew and grew. He looked up. Dozens of giants were pouring in, the first wearing a golden helmet and swinging monstrous wooden clubs. Chapter 491, The Arrival of the Giants. A single swing from a giant's club shattered stone statues into fragments. Flying debris tore through the courtyard. A Ravenclaw student screamed as a shard struck his thigh. Flitwick darted forward, his frail frame shielding the boy, and waved his wand to block the worst of the rubble. "Back! Quickly!" he cried. Another wizard raised his wand, and 3 spells streaked toward him, breaking through a shield charm and knocking him down. A green light grazed Flitwick's head. A spell that should have been single now required triple the effort against enemies wearing amulets. Fortunately, aurors from the Ministry were already on site, and their arrival eased the pressure, though their gear showed signs of wear. One auror's ring of striking ran out of power mid-fight, and he slumped, useless. Bellatrix drove a shattering spell through a wall and buried the unfortunate auror in rubble. "George!" Fred saw Bellatrix's unstoppable charge and pulled a smoke bomb from his pocket. George understood and threw his at the same time. One bomb arced into the air, the other skidded along the floor. Both erupted together in a billow of choking smoke. "Run!" George shouted to the students. Fred flung a portable swamp into the corridor. The floor turned to sucking, sticky muck. Enemies and students who couldn't see where they were stepping flailed and fell. "Please enjoy Weasley's wizard wheezes," Fred crowed, even as spells sliced through the smoke and mire. Bellatrix howled and fired blindly. A red light skittered past Fred. He felt something cold and knew staying would be foolish. "I'm out," he told George. "Same," George said, and they bolted. Gryffindor students kept lobbing Weasley's wildfire whiz-bangs out the windows at the army beyond the grounds. Tonks stumbled into a corridor, panting. "Wands up!" 3 or 4 werewolves thundered after her. Ron, standing nearby, drew his wand. "Impedimenta!" he shouted. Dean and Siamus fired off spells too. The werewolves chasing Tonks were thrown back. Chapter 468. Before the group could cheer, a werewolf slipped through a spell and lunged at Dean, who was standing next to Ron. "No!" The creature tackled Dean to the ground. Ron sprang forward to help, while Tonks shoved the werewolf back with a banishing charm, but it was too late. 2 bloody holes gaped at Dean's neck. "Dean!" Seamus ran to his friend's side, but blood poured from the wounds. "Apiski!" Tonks cried, trying to heal him, but spells could not mend a werewolf's bite. Dean's eyes fluttered. He was on the edge of death. Several werewolves nearby shook their heads and charged the group. Stupefy! Red bolts blasted toward them. Slytherin had arrived just in time. Malfoy and Daphne fired spells. Their curses struck the advancing werewolves. Blaze, ringed hand raised, produced a silent, flawless stupefy that felled another attacker. Glancing down at the dying Dean, Malfoy shoved the sobbing Seamus aside and produced a small emerald-green bottle from his pocket. He poured it over Dean's wounds. Under the potion's touch, the flesh knitted together as if by magic, because in a way it was. Tonks's eyes widened. "What is that?" "Emerald potion," Malfoy said with an air of smug pride, tucking the half-empty bottle back into his pocket. "A panacea." Dean stopped bleeding and sat up slowly. Malfoy rose and turned to leave. "Wait, Malfoy." Ron's face was a mix of gratitude and disgust. At last he forced out, "Thank you." "Thank me?" Malfoy sneered. "You don't deserve it. You never work hard, and when the fighting starts, you expect others to pull you through. A pack of—" He spat the insult, an old Slytherin contempt. Malfoy always seemed to draw trouble toward him. Those who knew him expected it. Ignoring Ron's glare, he led his group back into the fray. Their goal was pragmatic: keep as many people alive as possible. They pushed down a corridor, ghosts materializing now and then to report numbers. Myrtle clung to the ceiling and cooed in her thin, watery voice. "There are 3 enemies ahead, handsome boy." Goyle and Crabbe lurked around the corner like blunt instruments. When 3 wizards walked into the trap, the 2 of them surged forward, a combined battering ram of brute force. "Break their wands." Malfoy stalked through the aftermath, leaving broken wood in his wake. Daphne struck off in another direction and met Ginny outside the library on the 5th floor. Daphne surprised a wizard from behind and immobilized another with a full body bind. Then a roar echoed through the tower. Daphne's face went pale. "Down!" Ginny rolled instinctively. A wooden club smashed through the 5th floor classroom, shattering glass and stone. They looked down and saw a giant in the courtyard, taller and broader than the others, wearing a golden helmet, tearing a statue from its pedestal and hurling it at the castle. Each thrown statue hit the wall with earth-shaking force and left new gaps in the stone. Harry, on the 1st floor, saw the giant clearly. He remembered Hagrid's words. This leader of the giants was called Gao Gao Ma. A felly firework detonated against Gao Gao Ma's face. The giant, enraged, ripped over pillars and threw them like shot puts at the castle. "Stop it!" Harry cried, firing spells, but the giant's hide shrugged off most magic. A thrown stone smashed into the castle, and the concussion pitched several unlucky students from the battlements. The giant advanced with the thunder of massive feet. "Don't stand there, Potter." A strong hand seized Harry's arm and dragged him away. He looked up to see Professor Slughorn pulling him to safety. "Professor, we should," Harry began. "I'm sorry, Potter. We can't stop them right now," Slughorn panted. "I don't know why Albus hasn't appeared yet." Hope for the castle's defense rested on Dumbledore, but he was not present. Slughorn hauled Harry to cover and then turned to face an enemy. Harry thought, if Dumbledore was elsewhere, they needed to draw out Voldemort so Dumbledore could act without distraction. He set off through the castle, searching for any sign of Voldemort. On the stairs, he nearly collided with Theodore Nott. Both tumbled down several steps in a mess of robes and flailing arms. A small badge fell from Theodore's pocket during the fall. As Theodore scrambled to his feet, angry and panicked, Harry noticed the badge, a strange constellation emblem, flutter to a stop on the stone. Theodore didn't seem to notice. He glared at Harry and stalked away, shouting, "Get lost!" Harry shoved the badge into his pocket and turned to follow, but a banshee had fixed on him. The creature opened its mouth impossibly wide and screamed, a high, piercing wail that battered Harry's ears. Somewhere nearby, a shrill voice cried, "Minerva! A large number of banshees have broken into the castle!" Professor Sprout found McGonagall out of breath. She had delayed some of the attackers with a patch of Devil's Snare, but everywhere the battle widened. Professor Flitwick came running, his face white. "Giants have made it into the courtyard." "Many vampiric hags are swarming the astronomy tower," someone else shouted. The castle's defenders were being pulled apart. Professor McGonagall's jaw tightened as the list of threats grew. Slughorn, valiant but out of his depth for large-scale command, struggled to make decisive calls. Auror Delacour burst in, breathless. "Look outside!" They all went to the windows. From the dark water of the Black Lake, enormous shapes were surfacing. Two pale giants, but lifeless, Inferi animated in giant form. After them, more Inferi crawled from the water in a relentless procession, like a tide intent on swallowing the castle's outer defenses. An armored figure, sword flashing, charged into the fray with a cry, "Charge! I am a dragon knight!" Steel met wrought as the armored man drove his blade into one Inferius, and others followed his example. But more and more rose from the lake. No one knew how many lay beneath that black surface. McGonagall used transfiguration to raise two toppled pillars into a barricade and cast shields to block the worst of the oncoming magic. "We need Dumbledore," she said, turning toward Harry, who had just shaken off the banshee's scream. Harry understood. He nodded, face pale, and ran for the fourth floor. Surrounded on every side and outnumbered, the students and professors fought desperately. "How many souls has he taken?" McGonagall murmured, watching the endless Inferi swarm the perimeter. Spells cracked and faded in a war of attrition as the castle's defenders circled the grounds and tried to hold the line. Theodore Nott was running for his life. Every scream tore at him. Every falling student made his chest tighten. He saw for a heartbeat a Gryffindor student topple and reach out a hand. Theodore's hatred for Gryffindors burned, but something else, guilt, fear, curdled in him like bile. He gripped his wand tighter and told himself to move on. A vampiric hag streaked past, blood slicking its mouth. A scrap of school robe fluttered to the ground. Terror pushed up behind his ribs. He turned and ran, leaving the Gryffindor reaching and unhelped, the boy's eyes accusing. "What's the matter, Nott?" The voice made Theodore's heart stutter. He looked up and saw the old man, no longer distant and aloof, but here, moving among the defenders with steady power. Dumbledore. Theodore wanted to turn and flee, but some small, stubborn part of him drew him forward. For Hogwarts students, Dumbledore held infinite patience. "Professor Dumbledore," Theodore blurted as he drew near. Dumbledore was sweeping the immediate area clean of small monsters with precise, economical magic. He flicked his wand and rescued the Gryffindor, who had been left on the steps. Theodore watched, white-faced and shaking, and realized that whatever cowardice he had just committed had been seen. Chapter 469, another attacker about to raise his wand was struck and sent flying. Dumbledore's commanding presence seemed invincible to Theodore. "Kill him," a hissing whisper breathed in his ear. Theodore stood dazed, clutching his wand as if the sound had frozen him. Before him, indistinct images of Dumbledore flickered and multiplied. "Dumbledore, look out!" Harry shouted, running forward. Seeing Theodore raise his wand, he fired. "Expelliarmus!" A red light flashed. The wand in Theodore's hand was ripped free and flew into the air. Theodore wheezed. Casting that single spell had nearly drained him. His chest heaved. Harry, furious, stepped forward. "It was you!" Theodore planted his feet, gripping the disarmed wand like a lifeline. "Don't move," he cried, voice shaking. The wand he still held was trained on Dumbledore. Harry felt helpless. Theodore's face blurred with tears. "I'm sorry, Professor. I have no choice." He rubbed his eyes. One of them reddened from the gesture. "You don't need to apologize to me, Nott," Dumbledore said quietly, looking at him. "I know you had little choice. My concern is for your father. Though you two are not close, I do not want him to be left trapped for the rest of his life." Tormented, Theodore's voice broke. "Wait, Harry." Dumbledore put a hand up to stop Harry from charging and addressed Theodore gently. "This sort of thing is not right for you, Nott. You are not a killer." "I am," Theodore suddenly snapped, then broke down. "I put the poison in the drinks. I let them into Hogwarts. I did it all." "Why would you do that, Theodore? I don't believe you could kill me. Murder is not so easy." Dumbledore's tone remained calm. "I am curious how you got them into the school. Think of it as indulging the curiosity of a man without a wand." Those words gave Theodore an outlet for the pressure building inside him. "The vanishing cabinet," he roared. "There's a vanishing cabinet in the room of requirement." "As far as I know, a vanishing cabinet needs a pair of matched cabinets," Dumbledore observed. "Yes, the other is in the Silverhand Johnny store. That attack was to distract so we could fix it." As Theodore spoke, Dumbledore regarded him with a look of reluctant admiration. "Theodore, perhaps you would be better suited as an alchemist. Repairing that cabinet is no small task." Even now, Dumbledore worried about the boy's potential. Shut up, Theodore snapped. He nervously trained his wand on Harry. What are you going to do? Harry had only just tried to seize Theodore and had been discovered. Theodore stood like a balloon ready to burst. One wrong move could send him over the edge. With shaking hands, he could kill the greatest wizard, but his hand trembled, and he could not bring himself to do it. He grabbed his right hand with his left and whimpered, "I'm going to kill you, Dumbledore, so no one can stop the Dark Lord." "Yes, no one can," Dumbledore said. "Is that why you framed John, the King of Slytherin?" "I didn't want to. He refused." Mention of the king made Theodore wince. "He wouldn't let my father go." "Your father deserved it," Harry shouted. "He nearly killed us at the Ministry of Magic. You don't understand. He's the only family I have left." Theodore broke down. "If I lose him too, what will I have left?" "You still have your friends, your Slytherin friends," Dumbledore said. "Have you forgotten them?" Images of Slytherin acquaintances flickered through Theodore's mind. He was not outgoing, but he had always thought of himself as part of Slytherin. "It's no use, Dumbledore. It's too late." He raised his wand. "He's already here. I can feel him." "No, stop!" Harry shouted at the same moment. Theodore's lips trembled. He couldn't form the killing curse. Something slid from his sleeve. A small green snake burst out and shot toward Dumbledore. Dumbledore flicked his wand at it, and the snake was thrown backwards. As it fell, it grew larger, driven by some dark magic, transforming into a huge serpent that lunged for Dumbledore. Dumbledore twirled his wand. A silvery white light met the snake. The serpent's body folded into a rigid U and froze in midair, its mouth snapping at Dumbledore's hand. From that open maw, a black liquid splashed, splitting into dozens of tiny snakes that bit and clung to Dumbledore's hand. "Harry, get back!" Dumbledore cried, his hand burning. He tore off the little snakes and stomped on them. Harry ducked, and desks and chairs began to fly, smashing into the great green snake and pinning it in a tangle of wood. "What was that?" Harry demanded, running to Theodore and kicking away the wand on the floor. Dumbledore held two wands now, his old familiar wand and the crystal wand Harry had given him. The one that had been disarmed earlier was the old wand. Harry stared at the pinned serpent, confused. "I think I've seen something like this," he murmured, "in a dream, during Mr. Weasley's attack." "Yes, you should have," Dumbledore said. With a sweep of his wand, more old desks and chairs flew in and joined the mess. "He is very close to you." "I always thought someone like him would hide a lot in school, secrets like Horcruxes," Harry said. "Or like this, an unregistered animagus," Dumbledore replied. A white light burst through the wreckage. Under Harry's horrified stare, the great snake's body shrank and shifted, folding into a human shape. Black robes, narrow, cold eyes. Lord Voldemort stood there, his wand set with a philosopher's stone glinting in its hilt, and emitted a high, cruel laugh. "Dumbledore, you are old," he sneered, pleased with himself. Voldemort waved his wand, and the broken desks and chairs exploded into hundreds of sharp wooden splinters that hovered like a storm of daggers. Dumbledore raised a barrier of white light, but Voldemort lashed out again. Cracks spread across the outer wall of the classroom, chunks peeling away. Dumbledore cast silently. Two stones thrust up from the floor and jammed against the wall, cushioning it and keeping it from yielding. He then turned the floor into a long, slick carpet, denying anyone purchase. Voldemort rose and glided like a Dementor, avoiding the carpet. "You cannot stop me, Dumbledore." Voldemort flew out across the grounds, his voice cold and echoing through the castle. Dumbledore looked toward the windows. Thousands of Inferi swarmed densely around the castle, massing beneath the moonlight. The brief confrontation had cost them both. Harry called urgently, "Dumbledore, we need reinforcements." Dumbledore nodded, grabbed Harry's arm, and hurried upstairs. Theodore realized no one was paying attention to him now. He saw the tide of Inferi and panicked, snatched his wand, and ran down. He nearly collided with Pansy, who flung herself into his arms. "Pansy, what are you doing here?" Theodore almost stumbled. "I was worried about you." Pansy took his hand, tugging him. "Come on, we should meet up with everyone." "I can't go, Pansy." "Why? It's safer with them." Before she could get an answer, Theodore was pushed to the ground. His wand skittered away and was stamped under a boot. "Goyle, Crabbe, stop him!" Pansy shouted, battering the two hulking boys with her fists. Draco Malfoy stooped, picked up the wand, and sneered. "You betrayed us, didn't you?" Theodore opened his mouth, then finally lowered his head, defeated. Pansy could not believe her boyfriend had betrayed them. "Pansy, you and Goyle, Crabbe, take him to the dungeons," Malfoy ordered. He glanced toward the battle outside and sighed. "We're in for a rough fight." Inferi poured out of the Black Lake and surged around the castle from every direction. Teachers and students fought together, but the tide was relentless. Screeches of banshees filled Hogwarts's halls. Giants swung enormous clubs. "We're running out of strength." Ron and the others, their supply of Weasley's Wizard Wheezes products exhausted, looked drained. Inferi climbed over the castle walls like a nightmare come to life. Then flames flared. On one of the towers, Dumbledore waved his wand, and the fire coalesced into a phoenix of living flame, its crimson tail sweeping, burning the Inferi it touched. "It's Dumbledore!" The sight lifted the defenders' spirits. But out on the grounds, Voldemort and his followers watched with hungry eyes. Lord Voldemort descended from the sky, landing before the other dark wizards, his narrow, crimson gaze fixed on the castle. Chapter 493, The Brothers. Encounter Lord Voldemort had raised a vast army of Inferi, even warping giants into those lifeless shapes. They feared only light and fire. Dumbledore's phoenix fire drove them back for a time. But against such numbers, even Dumbledore could only hold them at bay. Thousands pressed forward. Voldemort had struck Hogsmeade first, cutting off Hogwarts' chances of outside help. Aurors could not easily come. To ensure no one slipped out for aid, a contingent of Death Eaters guarded the castle exits. "This is truly tiresome," a dark-skinned wizard muttered, standing among the followers. They rallied to Voldemort for power and for the savage hunger inside them. They wanted death. They wanted slaughter. They wanted to strip life away from others. Chapter 470. As soon as they arrived, they were assigned to guard the gate. There were purebloods here, and there were the vicious criminals as well. The hush at the entrance was broken by the sound of a car, not a magical vehicle, but a muggle one, crawling up the muddy road. A man stepped out, and a gray owl flapped down to perch on the car roof. "Excuse me, have you seen my son?" the man asked. The wizards on duty blinked in surprise. "A muggle?" One dark-skinned wizard drawled, curling his lips into a sinister grin. "I don't know how you got here, but you'll give us some entertainment." He drew his wand, already thinking of how to torment this lost lamb. The man, Watson, looked up at the castle where flames still licked the battlements, and the sky reflected thousands of falling bodies. His face hardened. Had something really happened to his son? Watson took a deep breath. "Kill them," he ordered coldly. The wizard's amusement faltered. A sound split the night. The laughter cut off, and every wizard present looked up. Gun muzzles emerged from the dark and trained on them. Watson's expression didn't change as he said calmly, "Fire." Bullets shredded through the air. Some wizards threw up shield charms, but a figure leapt out of the trees, muscles taut, and hurled a spear that punched through a shield and pinned a wizard to the ground. Watson bent to pick up a spent bullet, rolling it between his fingers with idle familiarity. "Let's go," he said. "My son's still inside." Atop the castle, Dumbledore was sweeping walls of fire to roast the Inferi, knocking more of them down by the dozen. Hogwarts' crisis was being pushed back. Harry felt a surge of hope. They might survive this after all. Then Dumbledore's face fell. His body wavered, and he almost toppled. Harry rushed forward and caught him. "What's wrong, Professor?" he asked, alarmed. Dumbledore's lips had lost color. Only then did Harry see a tiny bite mark on the back of Dumbledore's right hand. "He hid the toxin in his teeth," Dumbledore said with a bitter smile. "I am old, after all." In the earlier duel, the black snake had grazed Dumbledore. Voldemort had not realized how much it had done. Harry steadied him as Dumbledore whispered, "Hold me like this. Don't let me fall. Don't let them know." He could not let Voldemort see there was something wrong. If it became clear that Dumbledore was compromised, Voldemort would abandon caution and strike without mercy. Dumbledore leaned on Harry and staggered into the headmaster's office. Harry tore open the medicine cabinet and began to rummage through the potions Slughorn had stored there when he became headmaster. He handed bottle after bottle to Dumbledore, but none would work against the toxin poisoning him. Right, that potion, Harry thought. The emerald green one. But Slughorn had already used the last of it. Harry's hope dimmed until a clear, beautiful song filled the room. Fawkes, the phoenix, flew in and settled at Dumbledore's side. Dumbledore's right hand had blackened like charred wood, vitality draining from him. The curse was both toxin and ward. Fawkes drew close, and a single tear fell onto the wound. White smoke rose from the tiny bite marks, and color returned to Dumbledore's face. It was temporary. The phoenix's tears could buy time, but they could not completely undo this particular curse. "This is a very powerful curse and poison," Dumbledore said weakly. "Even the phoenix's tears can't completely cure it." Outside, the battle still roared. Harry's mind raced. "We can find Malfoy," he blurted. "He'll have a panacea." It was a desperate plan, but John, whoever John was in this war, had never abandoned his own. Harry rushed from the office. Dumbledore glanced aside as Severus Snape emerged from the other wing. "Voldemort trusts no one now," Dumbledore said. If Voldemort trusted no one, Snape's double-agent work might mean nothing. Snape's face tightened. "Even with the Emerald Potion, the wound could not be cured," Dumbledore said. "There is only one way," Snape replied. "Drink the substance." He meant the liquid in the Grail, the panacea that restored life. To take it would be to prevent Dumbledore from passing away the natural way, to deny the end that gives meaning to life. Dumbledore shook his head. "Are you trying me as well, Severus? You have changed." Snape said nothing. No one could be certain what had shifted in him. Perhaps Voldemort's silence after the Ministry debacle had driven him to doubt his usefulness, to either master. Perhaps seeing the student he had feared, the one who now challenged the laws of their world, had awakened something in him. 15 years of repressed regret did not vanish. It festered. Snape had wavered, and that uncertainty made him harder to face even himself. Meanwhile, in another part of the grounds, Malfoy booted an Inferius off the ramparts and sent a conjured snake slithering from his wand to wrap around a banshee's neck. His shield charm flared as a vampire lunged at him. He knocked it back with a stupefy. "There really are a lot of them," he muttered. Blaze's voice rose in panic. His amulet lay shattered in his hand. In the entrance hall, a professor struggled to hold her ground until Sirius seized a chance to fling a brilliant charm into the air, a super lumos that hung like a second sun and drove the Inferi back, if only temporarily. A banshee dropped toward Sirius, teeth bared for his throat. He was already changing, fur sprouting and bones shifting. In a second, he became a massive black dog and clamped his jaws around the banshee's neck, dragging it and flinging it into the pile of animated corpses. Lupin whirled, breaking the ankle of a charging giant with a well-placed charm, then dodged a vampire and sent a volley of spells that tore stones from the battlements and hurled them at an advancing wizard. "Too many," he shouted, grabbing Tonks and shepherding her behind cover. "Those Inferi just keep coming." "I'm working on it, Moony," Sirius barked, leaping back into human form to block a spell and hurl a returning fire charm that set another Inferius ablaze and shoved it into the horde. His foot suddenly caught on something. He was yanked down by an unseen force. His wand clattered away and skittered across the ground. He pivoted and tried to scramble back, scraping with hands and heels. "Super Lumos," Lupin called, hurling another ball of light to help. Using the illumination, Sirius snatched up his wand and turned to face whatever had grabbed him. Then he looked up and froze. Standing in front of him was a face he had never forgotten, the youthful face of Regulus Black, his brother, pale and drowned and now animated as an Inferius. Sirius felt the world tilt. All the old anger and scorn he had held for Regulus, the jesting cruelty, the way he'd mocked him in front of his godson, crashed into a new, terrible grief. Regulus had once been his family's pride. How had it come to this? He could see the hollow of the eyes, the rigid water-stiffened muscles. Sirius's wand felt like a weight of lead in his hand, heavy and useless. The ball of light overhead was already fading. Sirius made a decision that split him in two. "Better to free you than let you drown forever," he thought, voice cracking somewhere between a roar and a sob. He tightened his grip, raised his wand, and prepared to do what he knew would be the only mercy left. Incendio! Flames erupted over Regulus's body, and the tight fist that had gripped the Inferi at his side finally loosened. For a heartbeat, Sirius thought he saw his dead brother smile. Regulus's burning hand touched another Inferius, and the flames spread across them like wildfire. Sirius watched, heart heavy, as Regulus was consumed and murmured, "Good night, Regulus. I hope you have a good dream." "Leave this absurd dream, my brother." With eyes stinging, Sirius turned and plunged back into the fight. There were simply too many. The Inferi swarmed in endless waves. Even with spells of light that repelled them, the sheer numbers would grind the defenders down unless they could hold out until dawn. Worse, there were rival wizards lurking who coveted the Constellation Society's power, and Lord Voldemort himself. Dumbledore's single bold intervention had lifted morale, but it could not erase the numerical disadvantage. Even Slytherin, armored in the same strange of-series gear, had been injured. Malfoy was dragging Blaise with one arm while fending off attacks with the other. Daphne had come down to support with Ginny. "Giants are tearing the castle apart," Daphne cried. "Their skin's too thick to hurt normally." "Ginny, you're Percy's sister. Get to the Constellation Society and hide," Malfoy snapped when he saw her out in the open. "I'm not leaving," Ginny shot back. "I want to fight. Gryffindor doesn't know how to run." "Who cares about Gryffindor?" Malfoy snapped, irritated. "If anything happens to you, Percy will kill me." "Then let him," Ginny huffed, stubborn as ever, and with a flick she unleashed a dazzling, shattering charm that exploded over a dark wizard. Goyle swallowed and admitted, "I think she has a point." "Whose side are you even on?" Malfoy barked, giving Goyle a kick. "Clear a path." Two large boys, hearing the order, squared their shoulders and charged into the Inferi horde like living battering rams, chainmail ringing. The impact sent a shockwave through the throng. Inferi were flung aside. Malfoy, Daphne, and Ginny surged forward together. Daphne made the ground beneath several Inferi sink away. Malfoy sent a black snake from his wand tip to coil around an Inferius's neck. Ginny's shattering charm struck the Inferi in the pit, white light exploding against them and erasing them. They were almost out of the foyer when a giant's club came down. Malfoy only had time for a shield charm. The club slammed into it and sent him flying. Daphne dodged with a flexible backbend, typical of a girl who'd been trained to move that way. Ginny rolled to safety, called, "Accio broom," and a broom shot into her hand. She mounted it and flew up, blinding a giant with a dazzling spell aimed at its eyes. Malfoy, lucky to be alive, but worse for wear, ripped off his cumbersome robe and threw it aside, then punched a banshee in the nose. He grabbed the dazed creature by the throat and hurled her toward the blinded giant. The giant stamped, crushing the banshee. Its thrashing crushed a dozen Inferi beneath it. "Where's Percy?" Malfoy roared, dodging another giant's foot. Without Constellation Society badges, they couldn't use the protection, and time was bleeding away. Harry finally found him. He ran up, grabbed Malfoy's arm, and demanded, "Do you still have that universal potion?" Malfoy blinked. "What?" Ron and Hermione surged out behind Harry. Malfoy frowned and yanked his arm free. "Why should I give it to you?" "Dumbledore needs it, please," Harry began, but a banshee screamed, a shriek that made ears ring. Malfoy's face twisted with pain. His wand shot out a spell that the banshee dodged. "What did you say?" Malfoy shouted, half-deafened. "I said I need the universal potion." Harry roared back. Malfoy punched him, quick and furious, and Harry felt his nose might be broken. "Don't get in the way," Malfoy snarled, rolling to avoid a spell. They had no choice but to work together. The Inferi pressed in, and the two who had most often scowled at each other fell back to back, protecting one another. "Harry!" Hermione called, too far away to reach him. Professor McGonagall, transformed into a tabby, threaded nimbly between giant Inferi. Professor Flitwick was being chased by a giant. Slughorn and Professor Sprout led students in felling banshees. A brilliant white flash burst through the castle like a stun grenade, and everything around them was lit. From the foyer, someone rushed out, carrying a large sack and flung it high into the air. "Mirage," a voice commanded. A thick, unyielding mist poured from a wand. The bag exploded overhead with a rustling shower. Cursed sand. As it fell, the sand coalesced into humanoid figures and surged toward the Inferi, latching onto them and tangling them up. "Draco, I'm going to settle this. Bullying my girlfriend doesn't fly." Cedric's voice rang clear. Malfoy had never been happier to be confronted. Cedric had returned. He'd come with Percy and Fleur. The cursed sand formed faceless sand people that rushed the Inferi and bound them. Astoria slipped past the fighting and flung herself at Malfoy, clinging to him. He could feel the tears on his shoulder. Guilt slammed into him at making her worry. Daphne watched, a strange twist of jealousy and confusion passing over her face. "Cedric, how much cursed sand did you bring?" Percy asked, worried. Cedric flashed empty pockets and said, "I threw everything away just to bring this back." He waved his wand, and one sandbag after another launched, exploding above Hogwarts. The Sand People swarmed the Inferi and bought precious time. Harry didn't want to interrupt Malfoy and Astoria's reunion, but there was no time. He jabbed Malfoy again. At last Malfoy, brusque but pragmatic, dug out half a bottle of the Emerald Universal Potion and flung it at Harry. "Take it. If Dumbledore goes, we're all done for." Harry grabbed it and sprinted for Dumbledore's location. Hermione and Ron couldn't follow. The battle pinched them off. Cedric controlled the mist, using it to confuse the dark creatures. Professor Sprout watched, proud. Here was a Hufflepuff who had learned more than herbs and simple charms. Cedric whipped up an illusionary pyramid from the fog, some trick of transfiguration he'd picked up on his travels. The giants, fooled, smashed at the phantasm with planks and swung wildly. One swing sent a large pack of Inferi flying. Percy threw himself into the fray. Fleur dove through the smoke and rescued Charlie, who had been grabbed by a vampiric bird, with a single swift spell. Charlie landed, rubbed his back, and grinned at Fleur. "Should I be calling you sister-in-law now?" "Humph," Fleur answered, chin up, and struck down a nearby bird. At the astronomy tower, the fight looked worse. There were too many wizards crowded up there. A large-headed gray owl had landed on the railing, and someone's wand was knocked away. Mr. Weasley and Kingsley were in trouble. Mr. Weasley squinted up. The so-called owl bared scales. Then a 15-foot Peruvian viper tooth materialized inside the tower. It opened a vast maw and spewed dragon fire, knocking down the sorcerers at once. For a moment, the thing that had breathed flame was simply a big gray owl again, which burped and cast out a thin wisp of flame. At the railing, 13 figures appeared in assorted stances. "Mr. Weasley, I believe we've met," someone said as they rode in. Watson had just flown up on the dragon, exhilaration written all over him. It was obvious this was no ordinary owl. What kind of owl breathes fire? Among the wizards on the far side, Lord Voldemort watched the stubbornly resisting castle with a cold, gloomy stare. Bellatrix stood behind him. "They are too slow, Bellatrix," he said. He turned to the wizards gathered there and issued orders in a thin, high voice. "Let the giants break through and destroy the castle." At his command, the giants roared and charged, paying no heed to the Inferi and the Banshees. Voldemort raised his wand, studded with a Philosopher's Stone, and a brilliant blue bolt of lightning streaked toward the center of the field. It exploded with a thunderous roar, and the wind blew the mortal mist apart. The wizards cheered and surged across the stone bridge. Reinforcements arrived at the entrance, a huge figure in leather with a massive wooden club wrapped in iron, and a smaller, heavily adorned warrior with shield and hammer. A cloud of dust rolled out of the forbidden forest, and a group of unicorns burst forth. Hagrid had called them. Rubus Hagrid, Hogwarts' gamekeeper and care of magical creatures professor, had come to help, along with his brother, Grop. Hagrid's roar echoed through the air. "No one shall pass!" Hagrid swung his colossal hammer and ran at the charging giants and Inferi like an unleashed force of nature. The enchanted armor he wore hummed with power, the purple magical crystals inset across the shoulders and plates pulsing as if feeding him strength. He struck one giant's leg with the force of a battering ram. There was a crisp crack as bone gave way. The giant screamed, toppled, and its enormous body collapsed, blocking the column behind it. Hagrid shoved against the fallen giant with his shield, pushing it forward until it rolled through the line like a bowling ball, knocking a whole group aside. The armor multiplied his power. A giant raised its club and brought it down on Hagrid. When the dust cleared, Hagrid was flat on his back yet completely unhurt. The blow had felt like hitting a sponge. Remembering John tapping and pounding on the armor before the fight, Hagrid laughed and smashed his hammer into the giant's toes. Inferi surged toward him, but Hagrid simply became a bulldozer. Shield braced, he drove through the undead ranks. The Inferi struck armors and hit nothing. The protection on Hagrid was absolute. Grop swung his iron-bound club with earth-shaking force. A charm struck Hagrid's head. He spun, found the caster, and charged, sending the wizard flying with a shield bash. For a while, the advance that had seemed unstoppable was completely halted by Hagrid and Grop. The unicorns, sacred creatures that rarely interfered in battle, ran in luminous circles that ripped gaps through the Inferi lines. Weiwei, a pure white unicorn, led them. To everyone's astonishment, a girl sat riding her back. Luna? Ginny cried when she recognized her friend. Earlier, Harry had been searching the castle for Luna. She had gone into the Forbidden Forest and apparently found what she sought. A strange, big, crumple-horned snorkack, already the size of a large dog, head-butted an Inferi. Nearby, Tom, smaller but vicious, sprang and bit through a wizard's ankle. Luna raised her wand, and in a voice like wind chimes intoned, "Locomotor Mortis." The wizard's legs locked together and he collapsed. Weiwei's voice rang gently, "You're here. I like your earrings." Luna smiled up at the unicorn. "These are called dirigible plums," she said, pleased. The unicorn, wearing the necklace John had given it, happily lifted a hoof and sent a banshee spinning away. Luna seemed almost dazed when Ginny pulled her aside to ask how she had won over the unicorns. "I met them in the Forbidden Forest," Luna said, as if that explained everything. With the unicorns in the fray, the Inferi began to be forced back. Jowu, the enormous cat, leaped down and sent dozens of Inferi flying. A casual swing of his huge peony-like tail swept a wizard off his feet and bound him. Tom's jaws worked relentlessly. Few creatures could withstand them. Sirius, transformed into a great black dog, moved through the chaos and barked approval. "Well done, Tom," he panted. Tom snarled and made as if to bite Sirius too. Sirius gave an embarrassed grin. "I admit I was wrong to ask for your help before," he said sheepishly to no one in particular. Professor McGonagall's voice cut through the tumult. "Do not attack the unicorns," she shouted. As long as the unicorns were left alone, the Inferi's assaults were blunted. The unicorns ran around the castle, scattering the undead, but other fronts remained under heavy pressure. Harry was running for the headmaster's office with the potion he had hoped would help Dumbledore. He burst into the entrance hall and was caught in an explosion. The next moment, he lay dazed on the floor, fingers brushing something wet. The bottle that had been his hope lay shattered in his hand. Glass had sliced his palm, and pain flared through him. He looked up and saw a giant with a golden helmet, Gao Gao Ma, towering above him. Gao Gao Ma was the largest of the giants, smashing at the castle's walls as if to tear them apart. Harry fired spell after spell, but they glanced off the giant like water. Gao Gao Ma reached down to grab him. Harry dodged, scrambled away, and heard Ron call. A massive wooden club hung suspended in the air by a levitation charm. Ron had set the trap and cheered as it fell and struck Gao Gao Ma's head. This was the same trick they'd used against trolls. "Now you know my power," Ron roared. Gao Gao Ma only blinked, picked the club up as if it were a child's toy, and swung it. The club was now his weapon. Ron went slack-faced, and Harry had to yank him away as the giant advanced. Their spells simply bounced harmlessly from him. Inside the castle, with its cramped corridors and long legs to exploit, Gao Gao Ma could have nabbed them both at any moment. Elsewhere, the last of the mist thinned, and even Cedric's cursed sand, carefully carried and set to stop the attackers, failed to hold. Cedric watched in disbelief as the sand's effect dissipated in less than half an hour. "Try another one," Percy urged sympathetically. "I only brought these," Cedric said with a wry, helpless smile. Percy called to Fleur. "Fleur, did you bring your things?" "Of course," Fleur replied with calm confidence. She raised her wand. A green flash shot high above Hogwarts and exploded, releasing owls into the sky. From their talons, tiny things fell, but as they dropped, they expanded in the wind until full-sized figures struck the ground with metal clangs. Silver Hand's creations, wizard chess pieces, were on the battlefield, swords drawn and ready for combat. The soldier-like chess piece drew its twin blades and stood motionless, waiting for orders. Fleur glanced at Cedric and teased, "How does this compare to your cursed sand?" "I don't have that much money," Cedric replied with a chuckle that dissolved into a grin. Fleur waved her wand like a battlefield commander and shouted, "All forces attack!" A ripple of magic flowed out from her. Wherever it passed, the soldiers surged at the dark creatures. Daphne, seeing Draco still holding her sister, moved angrily to drag her away. Draco vented his frustration on a few clueless attackers, then glanced toward Hagrid, who was defending a bridge alone. He clicked his tongue. That big guy's terrifying. Lucky I didn't rile him up too much back then. Draco might have been the only one who truly believed he had been careful. A sharp pain flared in his knee. He looked down to see a redcap rapping him with a wooden stick. More dark creatures swarmed in. He kicked the redcap away and felt a shiver run up his spine. Above him, something with eagle wings and a jackal's head dove toward him. Then a lethal spear flashed, piercing the creature and killing it instantly. In the span of a breath, 11 figures materialized across the battlefield. They didn't cast spells, but their physical presence was beyond that of ordinary people. An owl flying overhead sprouted scales and expanded into a dragon. It opened its maw and unleashed dragon fire across the field. Draco was still processing when someone touched his shoulder. He spun around to see Watson filling his view. Elsewhere, Harry and Ron were in a tight spot. A hulking figure, Gao Gao Ma, barreled toward them as if to crush them into paste. Just as it seemed they would be overwhelmed, a nearby classroom door burst open. Filch, tidy as ever in his caretaker's garb, strode out and assumed a starting pose. Speed equals strength, he muttered. Filch inhaled deeply. It was time for the caretaker of Hogwarts to act. A purple light pulsed from his shoe. The force propelling him crackled through him, a sensation like flight. The skinny man suddenly moved with impossible speed, a blur as he launched himself at the behemoth. In an instant, Filch became light. His kick carried the weight of decades of devotion to Hogwarts and struck like an iron hammer. Ever been kicked by light? He barked. Gao Gao Ma froze mid-advance, then convulsed as a searing pain ripped through his abdomen. The impact felt like a speeding train crashing into him. Organs churned, he spat blood, and his massive form recoiled, hurtled backward at frightening speed. Filch roared and turned his body into a bullet, aiming to shatter Gao Gao Ma's magically resilient hide. A squib was taking on a giant that even wizards had struggled with. Finally, boom! Gao Gao Ma's colossal bulk was launched out of the castle. He staggered uncontrollably, teetered toward the black lake, misstepped, screamed, and plunged into the water. "Is that Filch?" Ron whispered, eyes wide with disbelief. Filch glanced back, spotted the two boys, and without a trace of warmth shoved them aside before stalking into his office. When he reemerged, he tossed a box to Ron. "These are the inventions those two scamps made when they were at school," he grunted. He'd confiscated countless Weasley pranks over the years and kept many of them locked away. After dumping the contents into Ron's arms, Filch vanished from sight again. Wherever an enemy surfaced inside the castle, Filch appeared to kick them out. He also ran messages between the houses. Seeing Filch fight for Hogwarts steeled Harry's resolve. Even without the Emerald Potion, he would defend the school. "Uncle, Auntie, I'm scared," a child whimpered. "Don't be afraid, son. We won't hurt you," someone soothed. Draco shivered as he watched Mrs. Wick, the woman who had earlier greeted him with such civility, twist a banshee's neck without hesitation. These arrivals, speaking with foreign accents and appearing from nowhere, were far more brutal than the last lot. Where wizards might search for a weakness in a creature before striking, these people simply waded in and hacked through their enemies. Watson, nearby, shot a wizard who hadn't finished casting a spell. He frowned at his weapon. Rust was already forming along the barrel, though he'd only had the gun a few days. He had noticed, too, that some wizards were unnaturally resilient. Multiple shots that missed vital organs left them standing. Watson glanced at John's parents, brutal, efficient, and unmistakably Muggle. How could they be more savage than some of the wizards? "Draco, I want to know how my son is doing," Watson asked anxiously. Just then a flying dark creature lunged toward them and was shredded by a Peruvian viper tooth. Inferi behind Watson went up in flames. "John isn't at school right now," Draco replied, uncertain what John was actually doing, but willing to reassure. "He'll come." Watson swallowed his questions for the moment. He wanted to ask his son everything, starting with how an owl could breathe fire. Draco looked up at the dragon and thought, "Do you have some kind of misunderstanding about owls? Is that actually an owl?" Above them, Kiki flew and breathed a gout of fire that ignited the creatures on the bridge. Hagrid's hammer was gone, but a swarm of red caps had scrambled onto his massive frame, hammering him relentlessly. "Get off me, you lot!" he bellowed. Hagrid grabbed a red cap by the leg and used it like a cudgel, swinging and sending several attackers flying. The blows barely tickled him. In fact, many of those who landed hits on Hagrid found themselves injured for their trouble. The giant heaved across a succession of bridges, swinging and clearing the path. Nearby, Grop swung his club and felled one opponent, only to have two other giants seize him and bring him down. "Grop?" Hagrid cried, charging to help, but a large hand from behind grabbed him and hoisted him up. Seeing Grop about to be bludgeoned by two giants, a Peruvian viper-tooth lunged and bit into a giant's tough skin. The giant howled, grabbed the dragon's head, and flung it to the ground. The viper-tooth lay dazed from the impact. As the smallest of the dragons, the Peruvian viper-tooth lacked the raw bulk of its kin. The giant raised his fist to finish it when a figure bounded up from the earth and slammed a seemingly modest punch into the giant's face. The sound was a muffled thud, like a drum skin struck. The giant's head snapped aside, and he crumpled, heavy as a felled tree. The newcomer landed on the giant's belly, arms thick and powerful. "Valerie, I told you to bring some weapons," Seriosha Jovanovic grumbled as his younger brother stood barehanded, grinning with his roaring brown bear amulet about his neck. "This is better than fighting a bear," Valerie laughed, cracking his knuckles. The giant staggered to his feet. Valerie's blow hadn't finished him, but Valerie scrambled up his belly and pounded the giant's face from its neck. Grop rose too. He couldn't comprehend why this was happening, but he knew to charge and topple another giant. The Peruvian viper-tooth recovered and directed a jet of flame into the giant's face. Hagrid lashed out and freed himself from the grip that had held him. The battle hit a fever pitch. Unicorns countered the Inferi. Hagrid and his allies held the giants at bay, and the Jovanovic family tore through the dark creatures as if the fight were an open book exam. Fleur's airborne chess pieces combined with Hogwarts' enchanted suits of armor, pushing the enemy back out of the foyer. Teachers and students rallied together and drove the invaders from the castle. From the other side, Lord Voldemort scowled. Without John present, the field was still troublesome, but he was convinced the advantage remained his. "Come with me," he ordered his forces. Professor Flitwick marshaled the professor's power and raised his wand. "Protego horribilis. Protego totalum. Salvio hexia." Long, thin silver lines shot from their wands up toward the sky above Hogwarts, spreading slowly into a shimmering curtain intended to envelop the school. Lord Voldemort raised his wand, determined to crush them with Hogwarts' greatest magic and leave them in despair. His power coursed through his arm into the Philosopher's Stone set in his wand and back out through the core. Augmented by the prized artifact from the Silverhand Johnny Store's American branch, a massive bolt of green lightning crackled from his wand tip. Powerful magic slammed into the defensive spells. Electric arcs skittered across the castle as the wardwork splintered under that single blow. Dumbledore, watching from the headmaster's office, stared with alarm and disbelief. Has he grown so strong? Dumbledore had expected Voldemort to be more dangerous after his soul reconstituted, but not like this, far stronger than he'd been at the Ministry. His gaze dropped to the crystal wand. He had been ambushed, and for the first time, he doubted whether his current strength could force Voldemort to retreat. With Hogwarts reopened, Voldemort's orders sent a wave of wizards charging into the castle. Hagrid met them, and was immediately hit with dozens of charms. He was buffeted and knocked about like a rag doll. Only a suit of armor forged by the greatest alchemist of the age kept him alive. Still, he could not hold them back. The first to appear in the foyer was Bellatrix Lestrange, and she fixed her eyes on the red hair. The castle was breached. Maddened wizards poured in and attacked the students without mercy. Professor McGonagall urged everyone to hide, but the advantage they had fought for evaporated in an instant. Bellatrix tore a girl away and tormented her with the Cruciatus curse. "You ugly old hag," she hissed. George and Fred flung charms at Bellatrix. She blocked them, then whipped her gaze toward the Weasleys' redheads. Fred, mouth dry but defiant, taunted, "You should pick an adult as an opponent. That way you won't scare them," George added. Bellatrix dropped the girl and chased them. The twins fled without looking back. 2 hours had passed since midnight, and now the real battle had begun. Wizards clashed with wizards, charms flew, and the bloodlust of lycanthropes ran rampant. Dark creatures rode the winds. Banshee wails split the night. A giant hand crawled up from the viaduct. Gao Gao Ma had not died. He had hauled himself back up, and the giants, reassured by their leader's survival, roared like earthquakes. To bring down a single wizard, 2 students had to cooperate. But the attackers outnumbered them many times over. This was an uneven fight. Unicorns were hunted, Zhou lay bound in ropes, and Hagrid was pummeled by a dozen giants. Harry and Ron found Hermione. The 3 of them fell into formation and fought together. Their first opponent was a tattooed wizard who spoke in a tongue they did not know. Hermione floored him with a binding charm. Ron exchanged a glance with Harry and blurted, "I really love her." "Don't be ridiculous," Harry snapped, elbowing him. He reminded them of Dumbledore's poisoned state and the urgent need to find a cure. "We should call Slughorn. He's a potions master." Ron thought leaving it to professionals was safest. Harry was not so sure. After all, it was that poison from Voldemort. "Are you sure the panacea will cure Dumbledore?" he asked. Hermione, practical as ever, replied, "Would Voldemort's poison be that simple?" Harry fell silent. If it were simple, Phoenix tears would already have cured him. Hermione's next words steadied him. "John will have a way. He'll definitely come back." Whether John could actually return was an open question, but Hermione's certainty reminded Harry of one thing. The panacea might not be enough, but there was one remedy that could. Harry's expression shifted. He took his hand from his pocket. The badge was still there. Malfoy ducked under an incoming charm and crouched behind a flower bed in the courtyard, muttering, "I think it's our time." Percy deflected a curse with a flick of his wand and sent a man flying into the stonework. "Wait a little longer," he ordered. "Wait for what?" Cedric, who had just saved Cho Chang from an attack, asked, "Who else are we waiting for?" Percy nodded toward the sky, where wizards were massing. "Wait for Lord Voldemort to show himself." If they summoned the Constellation Society now, if that's what they meant, it would play right into Voldemort's hands. An unlucky man fell from a window and crashed through the air, but a silver steed sprang out and charged in his place, trampling everything in its path. Gin Ledisley had arrived. "Where's Neville?" Malfoy noticed his absence. "He's waiting for an opportunity," Percy answered coolly. Daphne, who knew Malfoy's temperament well, remarked, "If you can't hold on, you can let Neville save you." "Me? Can't hold on?" Malfoy exploded with indignation. He stood up to prove himself, and a hail of 5 or 6 charms forced him to crouch and cover his head again. Then Malfoy saw Mrs. Wick calmly slit a wizard's throat with a single practiced motion. "That's John's mother. Protect her," he shouted. Daphne sprinted forward. As Mrs. Wick fought a wizard, a werewolf lunged for her from behind. Daphne fired a golden bell falling charm and sent the werewolf tumbling end over end. She smoothed her hair with her wand hand and, voice trembling just a little, said, "Hello, madam. My name is Daphne. I'm a friend of John's." "John's friend?" Mrs. Wick studied her face. The resemblance between John and his mother made Daphne feel as if John himself were watching her, and the sensation unnerved her more than facing Voldemort. Mrs. Wick seemed to sense it, and with a faint smile, said, "I'm very glad John has a friend like you." Daphne beamed inwardly, but kept her composure, staying by Mrs. Wick's side and escorting her as they fought. Watching Mrs. Wick's fierce efficiency, Daphne began to scheme only half in jest about how to get along with her. Someone sat astride the back of a Peruvian viper tooth, Watson. He'd been complaining about his owl's poor flying skills and decided to re-log in as the Canary Wharf's carmaster and teach it properly. Now, as a dragon knight, Watson gripped 2 raised scales on Kiki's back like reins and let the dragon roar fire across the battlefield. "Woohoo!" Professor McGonagall froze, recognizing him. "Is that John Wick's father?" she whispered. Watson's return eased a father's worry. Gone was the prudish muggle who once crashed a flying car into the humping willow. In his place was a man who had graduated straight to dragon riding. Even among wizards, few displayed such audacity. "Merlin's beard," gaped Slughorn. "Where did he come from?" Watson harried the giants from above. Gao Gao Ma, frustrated by the buzzing presence, hurled a massive wizard chess piece at him. The piece hurtled toward Watson, only to be met by 2 shield charms that tossed it back and smacked the giant on his own head. Watson unbuttoned his jacket to reveal a bulletproof vest layered with an anti-charm amulet. His house had been blown up by wizards. He'd raided his son's basement and taken everything useful. "Call me Neohuru Watson now," he might have said, but actions spoke louder than words. From a small handbag, he began throwing out sturdy carved wooden dogs. Each landed, grew to the size of oxen, and leapt forward, clamping on giant toes. "This bag really is useful," he shouted, as the dogs set upon the giants and the battle surged on. Watson smiled as he thumbed the undetectable extension charm pouch John had made for him. He drew out a small box strung at both ends with magic crystals, pressed one of the crystals, and hurled it at the giant below. The moment it struck, the crystals reacted violently. Two opposing magical forces locked onto the object in midair until the energies tore themselves apart in a massive blast. The giant tried to shield himself behind a neighboring colossus, but was still hurled aside by the concussion. Watson had a dozen more devices like that tucked into his satchel. George and Fred ran with their heads down as if the ground itself might snatch them. Bellatrix pursued them like a hound unleashed, relentless, merciless. The swamp of earlier had left her furious and unhinged. When the twins could run no farther, they skidded to a stop, breathless. Bellatrix slowed to a steady, inexhaustible pace and raised a hand, sending a jet of green light at them. The Weasleys ducked and returned fire. Charms crackled red and blue in the dusk. But against Bellatrix Lestrange, Lord Voldemort's most dangerous lieutenant, their defense against the dark arts grades did them no favors. After a few frantic exchanges, the twins were forced to fall back, eyes flicking, searching for any way out. Fred fumbled a smoke bomb from his pocket and, falling into practiced sync with George, lobbed it into their pursuer's path. The smoke swallowed them both, and the twins slunk around a corner toward the castle. Bellatrix kept firing curses. When she realized she had been tricked, she snarled, and black fury flashed behind her eyes. Cracks spidered across nearby buildings from the force of her anger, and blood oozed from the wooden stakes lashed to her body. She gave chase faster than they had expected. The twins ran for all they were worth and reached the castle first, panting, then froze. A banshee loomed above the gate, head cocked, mouth opening to shriek. The scream hit them like a physical force. Both spun, dazed, and raised their wands as the banshee prepared to wail again. A bright cry, "Relatio!" rang out. Red sparks struck the banshee and sent her careening away. Relief painted their faces. Familiar, defiant grins returned to the Weasley twins. "Ginny!" George called, spotting his sister being pursued nearby. He sprang toward her. Fred, wheezing, muttered, "I really ought to work out more." He took a step to follow when a savage curse split the air. Blasting curse, and the wall beside him detonated. The impact slammed into him from the side. George's cry tore out of him, terrified. "Fred!" Time slowed for Fred. When someone is on the edge of death, every sound stretches and sharpens. He heard George's call, the clamor of battle outside, and even Mrs. Weasley's panicked scream. His thoughts skittered wildly. "Sorry, George," he thought, and then, absurdly, about the shop. Weasley's Wizard Wheezes was taking off, and he'd never gotten Zonkos. He thought about Angelina, about pranks gone wrong, about whether George could run the shop alone. Pain lanced his cheek where a shard had sliced him. Blood hissed in his ears. The curse barreled toward him, and Fred braced to meet the end, trying to force one last smile for his brother. The explosion bloomed in his vision. Then everything shifted. There was a tumult of colors, purple, black, white, and gold, coalescing into a ring of force that isolated the area around them. The fatal spell smashed against that field and was snuffed out. A figure appeared in the maelstrom, impossibly small-looking to Fred in those stretched moments, and the shock made him gasp a single name. John? He knew John was missing. How could it be him? But there was no time to puzzle. The figure took the brunt of the blast. John was swallowed by the explosion. The curse that had been aimed at Fred dissipated into nothing in the larger detonation. Fred was thrown by the force, tumbling across the ground a dozen times, but somehow he sustained no more than the injuries he already had. The ringing in his ears dulled, the panic evaporated into a haze. His vision cleared enough to see a familiar, worried face bending over him. "Fred? Fred? You all right?" George's voice crackled, laced with fear. "Fine. Feels like looking in a mirror." Only you're missing half an ear, Fred blurted, leaning into a twin joke to steady them both. George slumped, exhausted, and glanced toward the blasted wall. Where the stone had stood there was now a crater more than 10 meters across. Fred, in his bleary, alive relief, managed a wide grin. I'm blessed by John, I tell you. Too bad he's not here to ask for a raise, George muttered, half joking. Fred saluted the crater with a crooked hand. To our boss. They had stepped through the gates of death and come out still breathing. Even then, they could manage to grin. Bellatrix, meanwhile, had finished her own business and turned away, not because she felt pity or because her magic was spent, but because someone else had caught her attention. Draco Malfoy stood nearby. Bellatrix's laugh was a ghastly, hungry thing. Draco, my little Draco, Sissy's pet. Malfoy snapped back without missing a beat. Is that you? You grotesque thing. How dare you still walk this earth? His taunt worked perfectly. He ducked a green bolt aimed at him, flicked his wand, and sent out a flurry of red light. I'll have my revenge for last time, you mummy-faced freak. Get out of my sight! Malfoy's venom did nothing to slow him down. He unleashed charm after charm with the surety of someone trained in them, firing as if the spells cost nothing. One charm struck Bellatrix, but a shield flared over her as if the wound had bounced off. Malfoy's lip curled in disgust. Thief, he spat. Using other people's tricks. Bellatrix's silver light smote him, and a shield shimmered over Malfoy in turn. The two traded blows without dodging, green and silver and red, and the air filled with the taste of ozone. Malfoy muttered, Ascio, and drew a suit of medieval armor into play. He sent it tumbling toward Bellatrix with a flick. Cedric Diggory, arriving at that moment, transfigured the flying plates into a throng of small snakes that coiled menacingly. The snakes lunged and bit. Bellatrix recoiled from the surprise attack, but the serpents fell to the ground instantly, lifeless. The magic around her was different, darker, older. Cedric recognized what he saw. Bellatrix was not merely wounded. She was uncanny, more afflicted than the mummies he had encountered in the pyramids, cursed into something like a walking corpse. Finish this, Cedric said. Cedric and Malfoy exchanged looks and struck together. They were no ordinary students. Both had seen battle and had been trained in ways others had not. Their combined assault forced Bellatrix back, step by step. The ground beneath them shuddered, and the whole place trembled. Chapter 4476. The two of them nearly lost their footing. Across from them, Bellatrix looked almost ecstatic. An ominous premonition rose in their chests. Lord Voldemort had made his move. He had waited long enough to confirm whether Dumbledore had succumbed to the poison. Seeing Hogwarts on the brink of collapse under his assault and with no sign of Dumbledore, Voldemort knew he had succeeded. Without John and Dumbledore, Hogwarts posed no real threat. When he entered the fray, his magic, amplified by the Starlight Wand, made him seem like a god among mortals, terrifyingly powerful. Slughorn, Professor McGonagall, and Professor Flitwick had joined together to stop the Dark Lord, but they were constantly forced backward by his onslaught. Three powerful wizards, each formidable in their own right, were being driven back by one man. Even Slughorn, elderly and not a combat specialist, fought with surprising tenacity. Voldemort raised his wand and spoke his signature curse. Avada Kedavra! A jet of green light lanced toward the three. Slughorn, dragging his heavy frame, stumbled over a stone and barely avoided it. The green bolt struck the castle itself. Wards and magical protections shattered like glass. Voldemort showed no mercy to his former professor. His eyes were cold as ice. I thought you wouldn't be so foolish, Horace, he said, voice laced with contempt. You ignored my invitation and still came to this decaying school. His scarlet eyes bored into Slughorn. My past admiration for you, my imitation of you in building my network. You disappointed me, Horace. Professor McGonagall helped Slughorn to his feet. Slughorn, furious, spat back. I should never have trusted you, Riddle. Don't say that name, Voldemort snapped. The mention of Riddle seemed to enrage him. He flung the dark mark into the sky, a proclamation of Hogwarts' fall. Albus is still in the castle, Lord Voldemort, McGonagall said, pale and horrified. Is that so? He should be close to dying, Voldemort sneered. If he's hiding and not showing himself, do you truly think he can save you? He believed Dumbledore poisoned and near death. This place had once been like a home to him. He had applied to teach defense against the dark arts after graduating, only to be refused for being too young. Years later, when Dumbledore had become headmaster, he had been rejected again. 2 refusals from the place he considered home had turned his love into bitterness. Now the school lay in ruins. It mattered little. Once Voldemort achieved his goal of eternal life, he would remake this place in his own image, a school that belonged to him alone. "I give you a choice," Voldemort's high, cutting voice echoed across Hogwarts. "Hand over your savior, and you may continue to live." He wanted to crush their last hopes, whether those hopes rested on a child called the Savior or on an old headmaster. "We have won. Your resistance has suffered more than half its number. My forces outnumber you many times over. There is no point in stubbornly resisting. Men, women, or children, those who resist will be killed without mercy. Let your savior come out," he demanded. "I will crush your last hope." The castle fell silent. Hogwarts had been split. Attackers led by Voldemort closed in on one side. Defenders, mostly students, stood on the other. Giants lay quiet. Dark creatures slunk in the shadows, waiting for orders. All they had left was a slender, desperate hope. Students filed out from behind a blown oak door. Hermione clutched Harry's hand, voice trembling and pleading, "Please, Harry, don't." Ron stepped forward as well. Not just the 2 of them. The whole Gryffindor contingent urged him to stay. Harry tightened his grip on his wand and spoke with a steadiness that hid his fear. "This is my destiny." He shook off Hermione's hand, past Ron and the others, ignoring Seamus and Dean's desperate voices. He knew the true situation. Dumbledore poisoned, Voldemort holding the upper hand. If anyone had to step forward, it was the one called the Savior. A path opened through the crowd, and Harry walked out into the foyer. "Don't go, Harry," McGonagall cried, horror on her face. "This is where I have to go," Harry said firmly. Voldemort's narrow eyes swept over him. "Come here," he hissed, pleased. "Harry Potter, the so-called savior who will defeat the Dark Lord?" "Lies," Voldemort roared. "This lie has deceived you for 15 years. Do you think you can oppose me?" he mocked. "You should still remember how to duel, Harry Potter." Just as in the graveyard years before, Harry and Voldemort stood face to face. Harry's heart hammered. He gripped his wand so tightly his arm trembled, he could scarcely steady his aim. "Avada Kedavra!" Voldemort shouted. "Expelliarmus!" Harry cried at the same instant. Green and red collided. Sparks and a brilliant flash burst between them, but it was hopelessly one-sided. Without the aid of the twin cores to complicate things, Harry simply couldn't match a master who had practiced the dark arts for decades. Still, even stripped of every mythic halo, Harry Potter was a brave Gryffindor. The green curse surged toward him, swallowing the space between them in breaths. Harry's face was lit by the lethal glow as he was forced to hold his wand with both hands, bending until he was nearly on his knees. "Kneel, Harry." Voldemort laughed, cruel and exultant. Just as the green light was about to consume him, a song rose, pure and uplifting. A phoenix swooped down from the sky, its blazing body taking the lethal bolt into itself. Flames flared in front of Harry. His wand was charred as the fledgling fell into his arms. He snatched it up, coughing, clutching the small burning bird. Voldemort did not seem surprised, only delighted. He laughed loudly. "Dumbledore, you finally came out." Under the crowd's hopeful, stunned gazes, Dumbledore stepped into the open. Voldemort's eyes flicked to his hand. 3 fingers had gone black overnight, a curse of decay and death crawling along them. Snape stood among the onlookers, his gaze lingering on the fallen Harry. "Let us face each other again, Tom," Dumbledore said, voice deep and steady. "Dumbledore," Voldemort replied, sinister, "you are but one step from death. You should have regrets." Whether he meant their old rivalry over a position at Hogwarts or something deeper, it was hard to tell. "I always regret," Dumbledore answered calmly, "but not because of you." The 2 greatest wizards in the world raised their wands for the 3rd time. Unlike their last meeting at the Ministry of Magic, Voldemort now held the clear advantage. Chapter 477. Lord Voldemort struck first. A green bolt of light shot toward Dumbledore. Silently, Dumbledore flicked his wand and sent a shattered statue hurtling up to take the blow. A second green beam slammed into the statue, and a shield fell from the sky to absorb the impact, Hagrid's shield. With the 3rd green flash, Dumbledore waved his wand again and summoned twin lightning whips that lashed across the ground, interrupting Voldemort's spell work. When two masters clashed, every heartbeat carried the intent to kill. Dumbledore no longer restrained himself. He had clearly realized this Voldemort was not someone to be sparred with. Going all out, a red and green ribbon of light sprang between them, connecting their magic. The colors shifted to blue as their rapid explosions of power forged a ring of stone on the ground. A colossal whirlwind formed around the two of them. Like a giant meat grinder, the earth beneath them was pulverized, dust sucked into the vortex, and thrown into a towering tornado. Voldemort flicked his free hand, and stones hurled from the maelstrom, smashing toward Dumbledore. Dumbledore raised his left hand. The incoming rocks folded into a new whirlwind surrounding him, resisting the barrage. One wind ring contracted while the other expanded. When they collided, the force of the magical fluctuations threw everyone to the ground and severed the link between the two wizards. Voldemort pointed his wand at the ground and traced a circle. A thick mist rose, and from it poured countless bats that swooped toward Dumbledore. Dumbledore swept his wand in a wide arc. Fire erupted, immolating the bats and sending burning bodies tumbling. Poison crawled up Dumbledore's arm along his blood vessels. The skin of 4 fingers blackened. The exchange ended in yet another stalemate as carcasses fell smoking. This time, Dumbledore pressed the attack. 4 columns of water surged from the Black Lake, converging into a torrent aimed at Voldemort. Voldemort slashed the air with his wand. The water froze instantly. With a flick of his other hand, the ice shattered into a hail of razor arrows that streaked toward Hogwarts. Dumbledore held his defenses, and the ice arrows broke into glittering dust. In an instant, Voldemort had already flown upward. A vast green lance descended from the sky toward Dumbledore. He raised his wand, hurling magic to resist, but the green light bore down, crushing his spell. Dumbledore took a step back. That step felt like the last straw. His entire right hand went black. Black veins crawled from his right shoulder up toward his neck. The pain was searing, unbearable. His magic was being eaten away. Using the last of his strength, Dumbledore staved off the blow. The 2 beams of light erupted across the sky, shattering Hogwarts' windows. The castle trembled around them. The Black Lake rippled, turning into a mountainous wave that crashed onto the shore. Dumbledore tried to hold on, but the poison ravaged him. His face drained of color, and he spat black blood. The wizard who had been their hope had been overcome. Dumbledore had been defeated. Voldemort had defeated Dumbledore. A stunned silence fell over Hogwarts. The teachers and students could scarcely accept it. Their beacon had fallen. Voldemort descended slowly, fondling his wand. "You were too merciful, Dumbledore," he said softly. "You should never have let Theodore go. Your mercy, your kindness to traitors, gave me this chance." He laughed, savoring Dumbledore's defeat. Dumbledore is finished. Hogwarts held its breath. Hope had been extinguished. Both the savior and the greatest wizard had failed against Voldemort. "Now, come out of the castle and kneel before me," he declared. "You will be spared. Your parents, your children, your brothers and sisters will live. You and I will build the new world together." "A new Hogwarts, a new magical world," he promised. The castle was deathly still, despair seeping into every corridor. Hogwarts had fallen. Chapter 500, Constellation's Call, the one who emerged from Dragon's Breath. "Sorry, our king doesn't care for the new world you propose." A voice rang out. Malfoy strode forward, nonchalant and insolent. "You noseless freak," he sneered. "How dare you?" Bellatrix shrieked, murderous fury aimed at Malfoy. "I'll kill you!" "Shut up, shameless old thief," Malfoy spit back. "You dare bark at me?" Voldemort fixed him with a dangerous stare. "Draco, you are pure blood. I don't understand why you oppose me." He extended a false offer of mercy. "Come into my embrace, child." Malfoy laughed. "You, half-blood, do you really think changing your name hides your blood?" He mocked, cutting deep. "Your mother must be so ashamed to have given birth to someone who won't even face his own bloodline. Oh wait, you don't have a mother. You're an orphan, aren't you?" The courtyard fell into stunned silence. Malfoy had pushed Voldemort's limits. Voldemort had at first hoped to win Draco over. Now he wanted him dead. "Avada Kedavra!" A green streak flew across the short distance. No one expected Bellatrix's sudden attack on Draco, until it made sense. She lunged to protect Voldemort's honor. At that moment, the sky burst into stars. Brilliant beams of light fell over Hogwarts. The lethal green curse missed its mark as Malfoy threw up his arms and laughed. "My king, look at this gift," he shouted to the stars. "The sun has night, the moon has day. Only the constellation always surrounds. Starlight, illuminate this land, summoned in the name of the constellation. Constellation Society, make your debut." The ruined campus changed. Vines crept across broken stone, turning it green. 9 doors appeared along the castle walls. The stars brightened. Dreamlike golden runes and drifting clouds descended. Stars connected to stars, forming an elaborate pattern that felt solemn and sacred. At its center, immense power gathered into a destructive pillar of rainbow light. It struck the dark creatures like a blade from the heavens, tearing into the ground. The black lake convulsed under the impact. The Inferi lost their animation and floated to the surface, drained and lifeless beneath the aurora. Columns of light erected a fence around Hogwarts, sealing every entrance and exit. This was the Constellation Society's cumulative power unleashed, a force comparable to the Rainbow Bridge John had faced in the Dragon Graveyard. Its members appeared on the battlefield, guiding the light pillars to smash the enemy. "The Second War has begun," Malfoy announced, triumphant. The previously despairing students erupted into hope. Just because the Savior and Dumbledore had failed didn't mean their king could not prevail. The Constellation Society's golden runes transformed into tiny figures that flitted across Hogwarts, tending to the wounded. Fred watched in amazement as a golden figure healed George's ear. Ginny's scrapes closed. Mr. Weasley's broken bones knitted. Lupin returned from petrification. Tonks felt warmth. Sirius's blood stopped, and his strength returned. All of the injured recovered. Daphne tapped the top of her head, and a gleaming Ravenclaw diadem appeared, placing her under a benign, luck-like boon. The two sides resumed their battle. Hagrid's armor, which had been prostrate, shimmered with starlight. Hagrid roared upward, white light filling his eyes as arcs of electricity crackled from them. He slammed the ground with such force that a ring of air blasted outward, sending wizards flying. "The advantage is ours. Do not panic," Lord Voldemort's voice boomed, steadying his shaken forces. His expression, though, was unreadable. He had not anticipated this hidden play, yet it also served his own aims. He had designs on infiltrating the Constellation Society and seizing the Holy Grail. "Giant, kill them!" he bellowed. Chapter 478, Lord Voldemort gave a single direct order. The giant Gao Gao Ma snarled, a golden helmet gleaming on his head, and strode toward the students. "Little brats," he growled. "Little brats," Daphne said, waving her wand. A door opened. "Now let's see who the little brat is." The door widened without end. A moment later, a terrifying roar shook the sky. The injured Kiki lifted its head and bellowed a dragon roar. Roar! Responding to it were dozens, then hundreds of roars. Dragons poured out, dozens, hundreds, filling the sky above Hogwarts. They opened their jaws and their scorching breath incinerated the dark creatures below. Giants? Against the dragons, they looked no larger than apes. From the clouds descended an 80-foot-tall black dragon. Even Gao Gao Ma, massive among giants, seemed small beside it. So many dragons silenced everyone on Voldemort's side. Even if not all had emerged, there were at least 100. One breath of dragonfire could turn the ground to ash. Wizards fought desperately. One dragon fell, and more dragons fired into the ground. No one could understand how this had happened. Voldemort's mind, however, had only one goal now, the 9 great doors. He rushed toward them. As he pushed one open, writhing vines coiled around him. Voldemort was no Theodore. His power was immense. He crushed one vine after another, yet countless more appeared. He searched desperately, but without a badge, he couldn't find the right doorway. Frustrated, he turned his attention to the Constellation Society members. "Seize them," he ordered, and his wizards surged forward. Exactly what the Constellation Society had hoped for, its members spread out across the battlefields. The Order of the Phoenix joined in. Dumbledore was helped to his feet by the 3 little ones. Seeing the weakened headmaster, Harry grit his teeth. "You need healing," he said. Dumbledore, as if expecting it, replied, "No, please don't do that." "Harry, where are you going?" Hermione called as Harry darted toward one of the doors. He held a constellation badge in his hand and pushed it open. The doorway led into a shifting labyrinth. Harry ran in. Chang saw it and blurted, "How can he go in?" Before Harry's door could close, Voldemort had become a black shadow and plunged inside. Harry, unable to watch Dumbledore die, lost himself in the maze. The labyrinth kept changing. Suddenly, a silver light glimmered ahead. Harry chased it as it flitted like an unbound sprite, sometimes rising, sometimes landing. With the dragons arriving, the tide of battle turned. Gao swung a club and smashed a dragon, yelling in a guttural tongue, "Who else?" As a brutal giant leader, Gao had murdered the prior chieftain in a single night. His strength was prodigious, and his golden helmet, an emblem of power, helped his skin resist fire. He led the giants against the dragons. Dragon teeth ripped bloody rents in giant flesh. Giant clubs smashed into dragon scales. As they traded blows, the students who had been healed were driven back again. If not for 12 fierce fighters appearing and disappearing like ghosts, Hogwarts' casualties would have been far worse. Malfoy found himself facing Bellatrix again. As his aunt, Bellatrix harbored a special hatred for him. Malfoy returned it. The Weasley twins joined in. Bellatrix took several hits and seemed unfazed. "When will John be back?" Malfoy muttered. He missed him. The Hungarian horntail Amerham spewed a gout of fire at Gao Ma. The giant strode forward through the flames, unbothered. Just as he closed on Amerham, a strange vortex formed in the blaze. The dragon intensified its breath. "It's useless," it seemed to roar. Gao Ma sneered. The giant's hides were highly fire-resistant, and with that golden helm, he feared no dragon fire. He was ready to taunt the dragon's efforts when, within the fire, a pair of vertical pupils opened. Gao Ma's body was hurled backward. The flames began to pulse in a rhythmic throb. Every dragon stopped its attack, raised its head, and unleashed breath into the sky. Out of the conflagration stepped the king of the dragons. Flames traced the outline of a colossal dragon, its scales wreathed in fire. Its body swelled. The heat intensified until the form became a colossal fireball hurtling straight at Gao Ma. The ground quaked as the inferno struck. When the fire cleared, the giant's outline was ruined. Sharp dragon claws had torn through him. Blood spattered everywhere. The golden dragon's chest glowed like molten ember as it opened its maw and unleashed a final, overwhelming breath. The temperature was beyond anything Gao Ma could withstand. The Constellation Society had called its master. The dragons had summoned their king. Thousands of stars twinkled as golden runes flowed through the sky and firelight struck the heavens. The giant leader was engulfed. The inferno melted the golden helmet. Molten gold ran down Gao Ma's face. Claws tore through his body. Roar! The golden dragon's cry made the whole magical world shudder. Gao Ma was dead. His severed golden head rolled to the earth. The golden dragon turned to the other dragons filling the sky. Once invincible, they now descended and bowed their heads to their king. Teachers and students watched in stunned silence. The golden dragon seized the fallen golden head and flew to the top of a Hogwarts tower. It opened its jaws and spoke in a voice like thunder, "Kneel or die." Terrifying dragon might poured down. The battling giants, seeing their leader slain, dropped their weapons and knelt before the golden dragon. The golden helmet was cast aside. Then, as suddenly as it had grown, the golden dragon's scales began to contract. Within moments it shrank, from 80 feet down to a size smaller than the tiniest Peruvian viper. A boy holding a silver sword raised it and gave a single command. "Dragons, return to your homeland." With bowed heads, the dragons turned and flew toward the gate that led back to the valley. John leapt from the high tower and landed as light as a feather. After touching down, he let out a chuckle. "It seems you all missed me quite a bit." The Hogwarts students stared, bewildered, at John, who had just changed from dragon to human before their eyes. Chapter 479. John returned with overwhelming force, scattering the mightiest of the giant legions. Professor McGonagall whispered in disbelief, "A dragon animagus?" As a master of transfiguration, she had never heard of an animagus taking that form. Slughorn let out a long, relieved breath. "He's back," he said. Ever since he had forced John to suspend his studies, Slughorn had regretted his decision. The events of this year only confirmed his doubts about his own fitness for the headmaster's chair. "I suppose I need to give you a new enemy," he murmured. John looked past them at the gathered wizards. "How about a team of seasoned aurors?" he suggested. He snapped his fingers. Fires leapt to life across Hogwarts. In the headmaster's office fireplace, green flames roared and Barty Crouch Sr. stepped out. All Aurors, arrest the intruders inside Hogwarts, he barked. If necessary, bring them down by any means. Aurors poured in from every corner. Hogwarts became an island. No one could leave. Wizards still bent on harming students found their exits sealed. They could not apparate away. The Aurors, with the Order of the Phoenix and Hogwarts staff, escorted students into the castle and ruthlessly cleared the grounds of Voldemort's followers. Barty Crouch Sr., in a sharp trench coat, strode through the courtyard, calming and rallying people at once. "Students of Hogwarts, you have done well," he called. "I brought the werewolf capture team," Barty told John. Zuofei's pure werewolf squad moved in and rounded up the bloodthirsty werewolves. For once, the Ministry and the werewolves were on the same side. With Barty's authority, the Order's strength, and the Professor's experience, the Death Eaters lost their numerical advantage. John's attention snagged on a woman in the crowd who looked uncannily like his mother. His father, Watson, touched the top of his head, and John looked up at him. "Where did you disappear to? You had us all worried," Watson scolded, though the smile he couldn't quite hide betrayed his relief. "All right, I'll tell you next time," John said, a little helplessly. Around him, his uncles fought with savage bravery that made him feel like he'd stepped into another world. Mrs. Wick cleared a shadow thing from the path and hurried to hug her son. Members of the Constellation Society arrived as well. "See? I told you he'd be all right," Malfoy crowed, though a fresh wound on his face still marked his recent encounter with Bellatrix. Daphne hesitated at the edge of the crowd. Fleur threw herself on John in a generous embrace. Percy, Rye, called out, "Voldemort's gone in. What do we do now?" "That's good news, isn't it?" John replied with a small smile. "This time, we finish him." The Constellation Society cheered, minds already racing toward victory. But John dampened their excitement with a quiet decision. He intended to go in alone. "Why?" Malfoy demanded. "You can't just—" "You're not familiar with the inside," John said coolly. "Leave it to me." Malfoy, who loved a challenge, scoffed. "But isn't Neville in there too? You can face him after." John knew Malfoy well enough to expect that. He was about to step toward the door when he saw Bellatrix Lestrange overpowering the Weasley twins. His pupils narrowed. He muttered under his breath, "You actually did it, Tom." His dog companion came running at the sound. "I wasn't calling you, Tom," John said, and Tom cocked his head as if considering the mysteries of canine life. Two owls, one black and one white, wheeled overhead, their talons rending the flying dark creatures. John walked over to Bellatrix. She fought with a ferocious, uncanny energy, like someone forcing life into a corpse. He thought of the scroll he had read, the night parade of 100 demons, souls ripped from the dying and stuffed into empty, animated shells. It was a perverse kind of immortality, nothing more than puppetry. Bellatrix's liveliness was Voldemort's doing, not her own. John drew his wand and whispered an incantation in an ancient tongue. Bellatrix froze, black smoke beginning to seep from her. She screamed, "No! No!" As a pitch-black, shadowy mass, the expelled soul slithered free of her body. With his other hand, he drew a silver-veined sword, its edge burning cold and bright. One swift strike cleaved the black mass in two. After a life worse than death, Bellatrix's soul was annihilated. Her body, emptied and motionless, began to dissolve. Malfoy watched with a complicated expression. After all, this was his great aunt. Sirius felt it too. Another black bloodline, another loss. The moment passed, and John turned to the heavy door at the center of the courtyard. He gripped the knob and pushed. A maze lay beyond. He stepped inside, and the door creaked shut behind him. Dumbledore watched him go, with an expression that held more than one emotion. This time, John intended to face Voldemort by himself. John chased the silver light that threaded through the maze, a pull in his chest growing stronger with every step. Familiar things appeared as he turned corners. A broken, tall wizard's chess piece, armillary spheres, quick quills, objects that tugged at memories of his first year. The narrow passages slowly widened. He even caught sight of the rear end of a blast-ended Scroot. They had tended the beasts before, and the sight brought a brief, absurd smile. The silver light slowed. John clutched the badge at his chest, the source, perhaps, of this guiding glow, and walked into a spacious chamber that felt painfully familiar. It was the final challenge from his first year, a platform with a mirror that had left a deeper impression on him than almost anything else. the Mirror of Erised. Before he could think, a force hurled him upward. A pale snake-like face hovered inches from his own, cold and terrible. "Quick," Lord Voldemort hissed, voice like ice. "Bring out the Holy Grail." Voldemort had reached the center, as he had so many years before, but as before, he could not touch the Grail. John looked at the mirror. The version of him reflected there raised its head and insolently flipped him the middle finger. "Quick, what did you see?" Voldemort demanded, his voice urgent and anxious. John stared at the gleaming surface, bewildered. He had no clear answer. Who could explain why the Mirror of Erised had insulted him, or what it really showed? He hadn't expected to be interrupted so quickly. The closer Lord Voldemort came to eternal life, the more frantic he became. He already suspected that the damned John might not be out of the picture, and yet immortality itself was within his reach. How could he give up now? Harry stood before the Mirror of Erised, refusing to hand over what it showed. Voldemort's greedy gaze searched desperately for any way to break through. He shoved Harry aside and prostrated himself before the mirror, probing. He dared not smash it. If he did, the Grail might vanish. Harry panicked. He hadn't expected Voldemort to arrive first. He reached for his wand, planning an ambush, but Voldemort felt the movement, raised his wand, and sent a red curse that made Harry convulse. "Tell me," Voldemort hissed, "how do I get what's inside?" Voldemort had lost his restraint. He didn't kill Harry because he figured he might still need him to retrieve what was inside. "I don't know," Harry cried. It was the truth. He wasn't part of the Constellation Society and had no idea how to obtain the Grail. Voldemort didn't believe him and answered with Crucio. Harry screamed, tried to rise, and was kicked back down. "Harry Potter," Voldemort spat, "you've worn the mantle of the world's savior all these years because of my mistakes." He grabbed Harry by the collar, his red eyes narrow and hungry. "Tell me, Harry," he whispered like poison, "where is the Holy Grail?" Voldemort released his hold, but the power on Harry's neck remained. He lifted Harry's body and slammed him to the ground. He didn't stop. He swung, and Harry crashed again and again, organs rebelling. "All right, just 2 more hits." John's voice cut through. He strolled out of the maze as if from a morning walk. Looking at Harry, he said, mildly exasperated, "Why did you go in there?" Harry could only stare, stunned. John shook his head. "He's smarter than you think. He should have guessed I was fine when he walked into the Constellation Society." "Right, Tom?" John said to Voldemort. Voldemort recovered his composure and fixed John with a venomous stare. "Surprised?" John chuckled. "You still have dealings with the headmaster of the Magic Institute, turning Bellatrix into something neither fully human nor ghost. Your habits are strange." "Luring me here," Voldemort sneered. "That was your trap?" "If it were a trap, you wouldn't have shown your face," John replied coolly. Voldemort flicked his wand, and a streak of green lit the air. John dodged without haste. "Ambush?" "You're mistaken, Tom." He descended slowly. "I didn't have to set a trap to deal with you. This is the 4th time, Tom." Voldemort's voice was low, bitter. John closed his hand and summoned the silver-veined sword. Silver rings slid up his arm. He smiled faintly. "You will still be felled by my hand. You won't escape this time." John's words were audacious. He intended to confront Voldemort directly. Harry, still reeling, blurted, "John, don't underestimate him." "Shut up." John's irritation snapped, then softer. "I haven't even asked why you came into my Constellation Society." Harry went silent. Voldemort jabbed, "The dragon was your doing as well. How did you manage that?" "How did I do it?" John said with a calm shrug. "Does a man need a reason to serve his king?" He produced a vial from his pocket. Inside, an octopus swam in blood. He drank it. Magic blood activated. John wiped his mouth. His pupils narrowed to vertical slits. "Time to settle this, Tom." He struck. The sword in his hand slashed through the void in a trail of fire. Voldemort answered with green light. "An outdated Dark Lord. You should have been dust in history," he sneered. John vanished and reappeared, pulling his wand and sending the ground under Voldemort's feet sinking away. Voldemort shot upward. Only a handful of witches and wizards could fly unaided. John triggered his meteor shoes and took to the air as well. He fired a blast of white light. 3 silver shields erupted before Voldemort's wand to block the shattering spell. Voldemort retaliated with a massive serpent of magic that coiled toward John. John didn't dodge. He sliced the snake clean with his sword. Wand in one hand, blade in the other, John was fluid and deadly. In his magic blood state, his power surged toward level 7. A dog leapt from the maze and latched onto Voldemort, only to disintegrate into scattered stones the next instant. The battle tore across ground and sky. Transfiguration, dark arts, ancient magics. Two masters matching each other in a duel at the summit of power. "I am the King of Slytherin," Voldemort raged, blasting apart the transformed dog with a green lance. "I am the heir of Slytherin, descendant of Gaunt." "So what?" John shot back, sending white light from one hand and golden flame from the other. "You ran from your bloodline, Tom. Now you'll run from death." John slammed his wand down. The earth cracked and hundreds of small birds burst forth, swarming at Voldemort. A transparent shield rose, and the birds shattered on it. John threw his sword into the ground. The earth rended, and crimson flames roared up through the fissures. Voldemort twisted, his robes singed, and John drew his wand across the air. An invisible blade cleaved the earth. He drew back his silver-veined sword and said, "Steady. You've spent your life running. You're a coward, Tom." He inhaled, and a mist rose to surround him. His voice echoed from every direction, unreal and hypnotic. "Stop running. Accept death, Tom." Voldemort answered with fiend fire, a hissing, burning snake. "A fragmented soul finds no peace," he intoned. The fiend fire slithered into the mist. A crimson dragon erupted from the fog and collided with the burning serpent. The impact cracked the maze walls. Harry watched, stunned. The clash of powers here outmatched the Ministry battle. The space was open, with no bystanders to restrain them. The dragon's claws tore at the fire snake's body, while the snake clamped onto the dragon's neck. Their fates were entwined. Both perished in a blaze. "Avada Kedavra!" Voldemort bellowed. "Reducto!" John answered. Green light met white in a cataclysm that shredded the mist. A blinding radiance shook the air. Ripples of raw magic rolled outward in concentric waves. Harry huddled behind a maze wall as the stone crumbled away bit by bit, as if weathered by 1,000 years. John felt the surge of magic within him drain rapidly. A system chime rang out plainly in his mind. Ding, magic blood ended. Then, lines of text appeared like a ledger. Obtained Black Lake spirit trait blessings. Elf, soft body, growth, longevity. Elf, enhanced elemental power. Soft body, increased flexibility. Growth, accelerated magic absorption and development. Longevity, greatly extended lifespan. The magic blood had ended. John's temporary explosion of power faded. Voldemort's blows grew heavier. John controlled the silver-veined sword with his right hand and hurled it toward Voldemort, but Voldemort deflected it with a flick of his wand. Their attacks muted each other in the same instant. John took a step back, and Voldemort noticed. "Too arrogant," came a high, chilling voice. Voldemort fixed him with cold, sharp eyes. "You could have continued to grow. I must admit, it seems your growth rate and talent surpass even mine at your age."